Chapter 53. Reaching the fourth level of arterial circulation at the age of 16. In the entire Chu country, this kind of talent was definitely at the peak. Not only that, Murong Feng's astral souls weren't weak either. His first astral soul originated from the second heavenly layer, while his second astral soul originated from the third heavenly layer. He was the purest type of stellar martial cultivator, and only after condensing his astral souls did he start to temper his physique. He used a year and a half to perfect his physique and stepped into the arterial circulation realm. This kind of talent was already extremely rare. After all, not everyone could be like Qin Wentian. Using the astral energy from the fifth heavenly layer to temper his physique, as well as the tyrannical tempering method of the tempered thousand hammer tempering technique, the effects of his physique would naturally be tens of times better than others. Murong Feng's words were very clear. Maybe in the future, Qin Wentian would have the ability to contend against him. But now, Qin Wentian didn't have the qualifications to be mentioned in the same breath as him. Qin Wentian didn't look at Murong Feng. Of course, it wasn't because of fear or trepidation. In truth, he didn't understand Murong Feng at all, and had no interest in understanding him. Regardless of how talented Murong Feng was, what did it have to do with him? But now that Murong Feng was representing the Knights Association, it had to do with him. Especially after the torture that Murong Feng had suffered not too long ago, Qin Wentian looked at Fan Lu. Can I make the decision? Fan Lu stared at Qin Wentian as he asked. No matter what decision you make, I will accompany you. Qin Wentian laughed. Of course, let's do it. Fatty laughed, as he turned to Luo Huan, senior sister, since they want to play, let's play with them. Let's set the time for a month from now. Are you sure? Luo Huan glanced at Qin Wentian and Fan Lu. These two people were going to be extremely troublesome to deal with. Fan Lu shrugged his shoulders, as he laughed, I don't have that many Yuan meteor stones. In that case, I can only use this method to raise the grade of my Emperor Star Jade Medallion. The top 3 in the Emperor Star Academy would be able to raise the grade of their medallion to the 3rd level. Since that's the case, why don't you raise your cultivation base to the 4th level in one go? In addition to the 202nd Heavenly Layer Yuan Meteor Stones as the wager, if you guys win, wouldn't you be able to directly raise your cultivation base to the 4th level? Orkan's words caused the surrounding crowd to draw in a breath of cold air. 202nd Layer Yuan Meteor Stones, to a new student, was an absolutely terrifying sum. 102nd Layer Yuan Meteor Stones were sufficient to upgrade the Jade Medallion to the 4th grade. Not only for the freshmen, but also for the Knights Association. This was a huge number, but he was sure that they would win. This was a battle without any suspense. Luo Huan's eyes narrowed. To the Qingyun Alliance, this number was still a huge pressure. Our Qingyun Alliance can still afford to fork out 200 Yuan Meteor Stones. The young man beside Luo Huan laughed. Luo Huan nodded her head, as she turned to Orkan and stated, Firstly, I have to make 2 things clear. Firstly, Qin Wentian and Fan Lu are not members of our Qingyun Alliance. Our Qingyun Alliance only acted because we couldn't stand the despicable actions of your Knights Association. A bunch of old students ganging up on 2 newbies, how glorious is that? Secondly, our Qingyun Alliance will accept this bet. If we win, the wager belongs to Qin Wentian and Fan Lu. If we lose, the wager belongs to our Qingyun Alliance. Thirdly, our Qingyun Alliance will never be like the Knights Association, using benefits to entice people to join us. And for those who are willing to join us for benefits, we will never accept them, even if they have extraordinary talent. The young man beside Luo Huan added, as a faint smile hung on his face. This was the concept of the Qingyun Alliance. Their style was completely different from the Knights Association. This world was originally a world where the hearts of people were blinded by benefits. Why did they still want to bring this kind of atmosphere to the Emperor Star Academy? The Qingyun Alliance had always upheld this belief. Foolish. Orkan and the other members of the Knights Association also looked down on the Qingyun Alliance. They felt that if there were no benefits, why would they cooperate? All trust was built on the foundation of benefits. 1 month from now, I'm filled with anticipation. Orkan led the members of the Knights Association and departed. Murong Feng cast a deep glance at Qin Wendian and Fan Lu, as a strange expression appeared on his face. What kind of blind self-confidence is it that made you guys dare to accept the challenge? If the rules of the Emperor's Star Academy were to be changed, things would be much better. Du Hao also felt that something was amiss, as he left with Murong Feng. Senior sister, are you the leader of the Qingyun Alliance? Qin Wendian stared at Luo Huan in bewilderment. However, Luo Huan shook her head as she smiled. I'm in charge of the matters of the Qingyun Alliance, while Orkan is in charge of the matters of the Knights Association. However, the leaders of the two alliances are Yuanfu cultivators. Why? Do you guys want to reconsider? That's not important. In any case, from today onwards, my first wish in the Emperor's Star Academy is to make the Knights Association completely disappear from the Academy. A cold light flickered in Qin Wendian's eyes. He would definitely work hard for this goal. It doesn't matter if you join the Qingyun Alliance or not. However, you guys have to make good use of this 1 month's time. Luo Huan smiled. To defeat 2 of the top 3 in a month's time, the pressure was extremely great. Fatty should also work hard. Fan Lu narrowed his eyes as he laughed. Senior sister, boss, I'll return to cultivate first. Qin Wendian stared at Fatty's departing figure, feeling slightly moved. What happened in the Dream Sky Forest today had clearly affected Fatty greatly. Even if it wasn't for himself, but for Fatty, Qin Wendian still wanted to raise his strength within this 1 month. In a month's time, he should be able to step into the 2nd level of arterial circulation. If he wanted to raise his combat prowess further, he would have to rely on the spirit refinement method to condense his divine yuan energy, as well as the earth-grade innate technique, the Thousand Hands imprint. All of these required a large amount of yuan meteor stones to support his cultivation. Seems like I have to make a trip to the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Qin Wendian murmured in his heart. He then turned to Luo Huan and asked, Senior sister, can I leave the academy anytime I want? Luo Huan naturally understood what Qin Wendian wanted to ask. Currently, Qin Wendian had offended both the Yi and O clan. Although he was very safe within the Emperor's Star Academy, would he be safe once he exited? Be careful. Luo Huan smiled. Try not to give others the opportunity to assassinate you. If someone wants to deal with you, they still have to consider the Emperor's Star Academy. Luo Huan believed that from the day Qin Wendian entered the academy, he had already been listed as one of the most important people in the academy. If someone wanted to deal with Qin Wendian, they would have to consider the Emperor's Star Academy behind Qin Wendian. Qin Wendian nodded his head. He understood that there was nothing wrong with being careful. Even Orkan wanted nothing more than to kill him. It was just that he couldn't do so in the Emperor's Star Academy. Work hard, junior brother. Your senior sister has high hopes for you. Luo Huan rubbed Qin Wendian's head, causing Qin Wendian to have a bitter smile on his face. Unknowingly, little rascal had already leapt onto Luo Huan's shoulder, rubbing its head against Luo Huan's face. Lecherous dog, let's go. Qin Wendian laughed as he turned and departed. Little rascal directly leapt down and followed Qin Wendian out of the academy. A human and a demonic beast strolled through the academy. The youth inclined his head slightly as the rays of the sun shone on his face. The corners of his mouth curled up in a faint smile. No matter how dense the dark clouds were, they were unable to block the dazzling rays of the sun. Luo Huan gazed at the back view of Qin Wendian, as the smile in her eyes grew even more intense. She was filled with anticipation for her 2 junior brothers. When would the future Qin Wendian be as dazzling as the sun? Many in the Emperor's Star Academy stared at the departing figure of Qin Wendian as they wondered in their hearts. A month from now, would the first student in the history of the Emperor's Star Academy to kill his opponent in the ranking battle be able to defeat Murong Feng? Qin Wendian arrived at the Divine Weapon Pavilion and looked for Francis. Francis brought 2 pieces of good news to Qin Wendian. The 3 divine weapons he had left behind would be auctioned off once in a while, causing a huge wave of commotion. The divine imprint that Qin Wentian had inscribed was named the Origin Returning Divine Imprint. Not only was it an amplification divine imprint, it also had the effect of storing origin energy. In times of danger, it could even save one's life. Not only that, there were many weaponsmiths who wanted to unravel this divine imprint. Hence, every time the Divine Weapon Pavilion held an auction, it would cause a huge wave of commotion. The second piece of good news was that after Francis had been promoted, he was able to come into contact with the second-level divine imprints of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Currently, he had already stepped into the realm of a second-level weaponsmith, and his status had risen by a level. To Qin Wentian, this was extremely good news. As long as he continued to comprehend the origin returning divine imprint, he would be able to use even better materials to forge a second-level mid-grade divine weapon. At that time, it wouldn't be difficult for him to raise the grade of his Emperor's Star Jade Medallion to the 5th level. At that time, he would be able to come into contact with extremely tyrannical Earth-ranked innate techniques. Qin Wentian first forged a few divine weapons together with Francis, before handing them over to the Divine Weapon Pavilion, allowing them to pay some yuan meteor stones in advance for his cultivation. At the same time, he continued to comprehend the origin returning divine imprint. Half a month later, Qin Wentian and Francis finally managed to forge a second-level mid-grade divine weapon using the origin returning divine imprint, and handed it over to Yang Chen. Yang Chen was extremely excited, and he immediately started to advertise the divine imprint, causing a huge commotion as he waited for the auction to begin 3 days later. As for Qin Wentian himself, he had already entered the most crucial period of his cultivation. The arterial pathways in his body had already reached a limit, and this meant that he was only a single step away from stepping into the second level of the arterial circulation realm. Chapter 54. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. Today was the day of the Divine Weapon Pavilion's auction. Although it was an auction, the Divine Weapon Pavilion did not have an official auction venue. The reason for this was because they wanted to raise the price of the divine weapons. This was also the usual method of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. As long as there were rare and precious divine weapons, they would be auctioned. At this moment, many people had gathered on the second level of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Luckily, the Divine Weapon Pavilion was spacious enough to accommodate so many people. Many adventurers who had been active in the dark forest for a long time had come here. Even if they did not have enough wealth to purchase the legendary Origin Sword, they could still take a stroll around the Divine Weapon Pavilion to see if there was a divine weapon that they were satisfied with. Naturally, the competition for the Origin Sword was bound to involve the participation of weaponsmiths. Gretchen had also come to the Divine Weapon Pavilion today. She was different from many others. She was determined to obtain the Origin Sword. Coincidentally, she needed a good divine weapon. She had heard of the rumors about the Origin Sword before, and her heart was moved. Other than that, if she could auction it off, she would let her master Murin study it and see if he could derive the divine imprints contained within. Accompanying Gretchen were a few of her companions, all of whom were students of the Royal Academy. Gretchen, other than being a disciple of Murin, was also a student of the Royal Academy. Fan Le had also come today. These few days, Qin Wentian had not returned to the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Fan Le knew that Qin Wentian was in the Divine Weapon Pavilion, and after asking around, he found out that the Divine Weapon Pavilion would be auctioning off the Origin Sword today. Hence, he came to look for Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian and Francis were also among the crowd. They were filled with anticipation, wondering how much this second-level divine weapon would fetch. Boss. At this moment, Qin Wentian heard Fan Li's voice. Turning his head, he discovered that Fan Lu and Sheena were walking over together. He couldn't help but smile. "Fatty, you're really something. I'm only here out of curiosity." Sheena felt somewhat bashful when she saw the look in Qin Wentian's eyes. "Sheena's skin is thin, don't talk nonsense." Fatty laughed. "However, Sheena is somewhat interested in that sword." "Oh." Qin Wentian cast a glance at Sheena, only to hear her reply, "The second astral soul I condensed is a sword astral soul. However, I'm afraid I won't be able to afford the origin returning sword. Let's see if there are any other divine weapons." As she spoke, Xian Ran's gaze turned towards the sword wall of the divine weapon pavilion. There, a sword hung there, radiating with light. Of course, it was impossible to judge the quality of the divine weapon just by looking at it. Only by channeling Yuan power into it would one be able to sense it. "Good sword." At this moment, a voice rang out from the crowd. Immediately, many gazes turned towards the owner of the voice. When they saw a young man drinking wine from a jug, the crowd couldn't help but laugh. "Immortal drunken wine, you haven't even touched the sword. How do you know if it's a good sword?" someone said with a smile. "It's just a feeling." Immortal drunken wine placed his wine gourd down and looked at the person who spoke. He shook his head and said, "You don't understand." "Ha!" Seeing the expression on Immortal drunken wine's face, many people laughed. Qin Wendian also laughed. This fellow was truly interesting. "She is Immortal drunken wine." Xian Ran stared at Immortal drunken wine, her eyes flashing with a strange light. "You know of him?" Qin Wendian asked. Immortal drunken wine, ranked third among the 10 prodigies of the royal capital. "Of course I've heard of him." Xian Ran replied as if it was a matter of course. This caused Qin Wendian to be slightly taken aback. This young man who liked to get drunk was actually ranked third among the 10 prodigies of the royal capital. The 10 prodigies refer to the 10 most outstanding geniuses in the royal capital below the age of 20. Xian Ran was somewhat taken aback. Wasn't Immortal drunken wine a little too easygoing? At this moment, Qin Wendian felt a cold glint of light shooting in his direction. Shifting his gaze over, his eyes narrowed. "Francis, it's you guys." Gretchen didn't expect that she would meet Qin Wendian and Francis in the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Previously, after returning to the royal capital from the Sky Harmony City, the Yi clan had sent over many resources, and Murin had allowed her to enter closed-door cultivation in the Star River Association. During this period of closed-door cultivation, Gretchen had successfully broken through the bottleneck of a first-level weaponsmith, becoming a young second-level weaponsmith. Just a few days ago, when she returned to the Royal Academy, the people around her all wanted to get closer to her after learning that she had become a second-level weaponsmith. A second-level weaponsmith didn't need to worry about connections or wealth. Not to mention, Gretchen was a second-level weaponsmith at such a young age. Gretchen's future was limitless, and if she could become a third-level weaponsmith in the future, she would definitely become one of the most sought-after characters in the Chu country. Even Yuanfu realm cultivators would need her help, and her wealth would be endless. The Divine Weapon Pavilion was extremely influential in the royal capital because they nurtured a group of weaponsmiths. The wealth of the Divine Weapon Pavilion was definitely terrifying. In this world, wealth was equivalent to cultivation resources, and with enough resources, experts could be nurtured. "Humph," Francis coldly snorted when he saw Gretchen. He would never forget what Murin had done to him, and this disciple of Murin was also arrogant to the extreme in front of him. "The two of you are actually together." A cold glint of light flashed in Gretchen's eyes, as she stared at Francis and Qin Wendian, who were standing together. After which, she coldly stated, "Snakes and rats from the same nest?" "Boss, who is this girl?" Fan Le stared at Qin Wendian, as his shifty eyes started to roam about Gretchen's body, causing Qin Wendian to silently despise him. As long as it was a girl, he wouldn't let it go. But of course, Gretchen was also a beauty to boot. However, Qin Wendian's impression of Gretchen wasn't very good. That day at the Star River Association, Murin had forced him to make a choice when he had nowhere else to go. This lady had used the same arrogant look in her eyes right now, telling him that with the status of the Qin clan, taking Murin as a disciple would be a great blessing to Qin Wendian, an honor to him. "I'm from the Star River Association, the disciple of a despicable weaponsmith." Qin Wendian replied. "Impudent." Gretchen's countenance turned cold, as a cold intent gushed forth from her body. You actually dare to insult my master? Are you courting death? You are the impudent one. You've already done it, but you don't dare to admit it? Francis coldly stated, Murin and I are both from the Star River Association, yet he forcefully snatched my divine imprint and refused to return it. Don't tell me you feel that's not despicable enough. Gretchen stared at Francis. She didn't expect that the fellow who had been so submissive in the past would actually dare to insult her master, Murin. Dog slave, if you don't kneel down and apologize for your words earlier, don't even think about leaving here alive today. Gretchen continued to look down at Francis with an arrogant gaze. In her eyes, Francis was nothing more than a slave, yet he dared to insult her master in front of her. If she didn't do anything, wouldn't she lose all her face if this matter were to spread to her master's ears? Upon hearing Gretchen's words, Francis's countenance turned extremely unsightly to behold. He, Francis, had always been a cautious person, and had always been submissive in front of those in the upper echelons. However, this was the first time he was insulted in such a manner. Not only that, the person who insulted him was a mere lass. Indeed, what kind of master will teach what kind of disciple? Qin Wentian stared at Gretchen. The things that Murin did to me, just using the word despicable, is far from enough. Gretchen shifted her gaze onto Qin Wentian. That pair of cold and arrogant eyes of hers seriously scrutinized him. A strange smile gradually appeared on her face, and within that smile, was an unmasked disdain. I really don't understand, what gave you the courage to say such words? I hope that before the auction ends, you won't escape. As she spoke, Gretchen's gaze shifted to the sword rampart in front of her, as a cold light flickered in her eyes. The three people behind her also had cold, mocking smiles on their faces as they stared at Qin Wentian and Francis. Who would be so arrogant as to offend such a young second-level weaponsmith? Not only that, this genius weaponsmith was also a disciple of the Royal Academy, and the young miss of the Guan clan. Boss, that girl's cultivation base is ordinary, only at the third level of arterial circulation. Of the three people behind her, two are at the second level of arterial circulation. As for the guy at the end, he's probably a tough nut to crack. His cultivation base should be at least at the fifth level of arterial circulation. Fan Lu whispered to Qin Wentian. If they were to make a move, it was best to first understand their opponent's strength. Only then would they be prepared. Qin Wentian lightly nodded his head, only to see Fatty laughing. If we were to make a move, we should be able to take down that girl in an instant. As for the other three, they wouldn't even have the chance to act. You broke through. Qin Wentian's eyes shone with a bright light as he heard Fan Li's confident words. Fatty winked at him, as he laughed, you've already broken through to the second level of arterial circulation. Isn't it normal for me to break through as well? 2 nights ago, Qin Wentian had already used his tyrannical astral energy to break through the limits of his arterial circulation and arterial circulation, opening up his second arterial circulation. Currently, his body could contain an even greater amount of astral energy, and with 2 arterial circulation meridians, he could sense every part of his body. Regardless of whether it was his vision, hearing, or the power of his attacks, all of them had improved by leaps and bounds. Why do you sound as though I'm inferior to you? Qin Wentian said with disdain. I'm just stating a fact. Fatty laughed, as his eyes shone with a bright light. There's still 10 days left. I'm really looking forward to it. 200 yuan meteor stones, even the Knights Association would feel heartache. Chapter 55. Qin Wentian was also looking forward to the battle 10 days from now. Currently, both he and Fan Lu had broken through to the second level of arterial circulation. In addition to the Empyrean flame bloodline in Fan Li's body, there shouldn't be any problems dealing with Du Hao. As for Murong Feng, it would be somewhat difficult to deal with him. After all, Murong Feng's cultivation base was too high. Not only that, Qin Wentian didn't know if Murong Feng had any trump cards up his sleeves. Hence, in the next 10 days, Qin Wentian had to continuously raise his strength. Firstly, before the battle, he needed to store at least half of the divine energy in his body. This way, he would be able to contend against cultivators at the third level of arterial circulation just by relying on the tyrannical strength of his divine energy. In addition to the mid-tier Earth-grade innate technique, the Thousand Hands imprint, he would be able to put up a fight even against cultivators at the fourth level of arterial circulation. The problem now was, how strong was his opponent, Morong Fong? The Knights Association would definitely allow him to make sufficient preparations. To condense so much divine energy, Yuan meteor stones were a must. After auctioning off the origin sword, there would be more than enough to spare. At this moment, Jian Wu walked to the front of the sword rampart and smiled. The rules of the Divine Weapon Pavilion apply. Everyone can bid for the item, and we, the Divine Weapon Pavilion, will prioritize the highest bidder. Of course, the final decision rests with us. After all, we are not an official auction house, and we have the right to choose who to sell the item to. I'm sure everyone has heard of this origin sword. Its base price is 10 second-layer Yuan meteor stones. Jian Wu's lips curled into a smile, but her heart was slightly moved. For ordinary mid-tier second-layer divine weapons, 3 or 4 second-layer Yuan meteor stones would be sufficient. But for this origin sword, the price would definitely be raised to a terrifying level. Of course, if there were friends from the Divine Weapon Pavilion who participated in the auction, even if the price wasn't high, the Divine Weapon Pavilion would still give it to them. This was the style of the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Now, we can begin. Jian Wu laughed. 30. A calm voice drifted out from the crowd as an old man walked towards the sword rampart. It's Old Man Han. Seems like there's no hope at all. Many cursed in their hearts. The price of 30 was already enough to cause many people to shrink back. I like this sword, but I only have a total of 35 Yuan meteor stones on me. Let's use them all and hope that our luck isn't bad. Immortal Drunken Wine indifferently stated as he walked to the front, as the crowd parted ways for him. 40. A few silhouettes appeared at the front of the crowd. It was Gretchen and the others. These 3 bids had directly drowned the hopes of the crowd. This price was too terrifying. Motherfucker, this daddy here risked his life to hunt demonic beasts and even rolled around in front of the Grim Reaper for over 10 years. Even now, I only have 10 second-layer heavenly astral meteor stones. Look at them. A burly man cursed in a low voice. Many in the crowd felt the same way. Indeed, the disparity between humans was too great. Qin Wentian sighed in his heart. This was the royal capital. If it was the Sky Harmony City, there wouldn't even be any second heavenly layer Yuan meteor stones circulating in the market. The first heavenly layer Yuan meteor stones were all treated as treasures by the various great clans, and were all traded using Yuan stones. This was the disparity between them. Of course, Qin Wentian had forgotten about this, because this was the Divine Weapon Pavilion. The slum district and chaos district of the royal capital weren't as wealthy as this. Gretchen's bid caused the entire hall to fall silent. For a heavyweight auction, there wouldn't be many bids. Maybe a few bids would be sufficient to determine the owner of the treasure. The majority of the people present were just there to serve as foils. Qin Wentian obviously didn't want to be a foil. Since Gretchen was so wealthy, he might as well extort some money from her. It's the lass from the Guan clan. I heard that you've already become a second-level weaponsmith. This old man here is truly impressed. This old man shall not compete with you any further. Old Han politely replied. He himself was also a second-level weaponsmith. Gretchen nodded her head to Old Han, returning the courtesy. She didn't bother with pleasantries. In the future, there would be many people who wished to befriend her. 41. Qin Wentian walked up as he calmly bid, with a faint smile on his face. Immortal Drunken Wine couldn't help but be taken aback when he heard Qin Wentian's bid. After which, he drank a mouthful of wine as a smile appeared on his face. He knew very well who forged this sword. Gretchen's countenance turned cold as she stared at Qin Wentian. Are you intentionally trying to cause trouble? Are you going to bid or not? Qin Wentian swept a glance at Gretchen. 45. Gretchen stared at Qin Wentian as she spoke. 46. Qin Wentian laughed as he continued bidding. Sword of Origin, aren't you afraid that it'll burn your hand? A person beside Gretchen stared at Qin Wentian, a hint of threat flashing in his eyes. Don't worry, after I bid for it, I can give it to someone else. For example, immortal drunken wine. I don't have much, but I do have a lot of yuan meteor stones. Qin Wentian shrugged his shoulders. You. That person's countenance faltered. Gretchen glanced at Jian Wu. Do you want to check his yuan meteor stones first? Maybe, he doesn't have so many. This is a matter of my divine weapon pavilion, there's no need for Miss Gretchen to worry. Are you willing to show your yuan meteor stones to others? If you are willing, I wouldn't mind. Yang Chen, who was standing beside Jian Wu, smiled, causing Gretchen's countenance to turn unsightly. 50. Gretchen coldly replied. 51. Qin Wentian directly bid. 55. Gretchen gritted her teeth. After she broke through to the second level, the Star River Association and her clan had given her resources to support her cultivation. In addition to her previous wealth, she only had 60 yuan meteor stones on her. But if she were to use them to bid for the origin sword, she would soon run out. 56. Fatty laughed, continuing Qin Wentian's words. Qin Wentian glanced at Fatty, and his laughter grew even more joyous. This fellow was proficient in the power of will, and had an extremely strong judgment ability. Maybe he would be able to discern something from Gretchen's expression. 57. Gretchen's voice was cold to the extreme. She wouldn't lack yuan meteor stones in the future, but she couldn't afford to lose face today. As for Qin Wentian, she would deal with him after she obtained the origin sword. 58. Fatty smiled radiantly. 56. Gretchen's voice grew louder, and the entire divine weapon pavilion fell silent. The price had actually risen to a terrifying 60 yuan meteor stones. This was madness, this was madness. TSK, beautiful lady, you are so rich. I can't afford it. Fatty flashed his signature wretched smile at Gretchen, causing Gretchen's countenance to stiffen. 60-second heavenly layer yuan meteor stones, only to purchase a second-level mid-tier sword. Although this sword was extraordinary, it still caused her heart to bleed. I don't want it either. Qin Wentian shrugged, winking at Fatty. 30-second heavenly layer yuan meteor stones landed in his pocket just like that. Boss. Fatty gave Qin Wentian a, look, indicating that Qin Wentian shouldn't forget about his benefits. Is there anyone else who wants to bid? Jian Wu laughed as she stared at the crowd. Bid my ass, this is too terrifying. I think I'd better go to the first level to take a look. Someone cursed rudely, causing the crowd to laugh. Indeed, this price was too terrifying, it was sufficient to purchase a second-level high-tier divine weapon. Since this is the case, Miss Gretchen. Jian Wu smiled at Gretchen, causing Gretchen's heart to twitch. After which, she passed all the yuan meteor stones she had brought with her to Jian Wu, while Jian Wu retrieved the sword and passed it to Gretchen. Who? Although Gretchen had obtained the origin sword, she didn't feel any joy at all. Her cold eyes swept over to Qin Wentian and Fan Lu, flickering with a killing intent. Next, it's time for us to settle our debts. Gretchen stared at Qin Wentian and Feng Ping as she spoke. How do you want to play? One-on-one, or a group battle? Fan Lu narrowed his eyes as he stared at the four people in front of him. Upon hearing Fan Li's words, Gretchen and the other three all laughed, as though they had heard something extremely amusing. One-on-one, group battle. Are you guys even worthy? Behind Gretchen, the young man with the higher cultivation base took a step forward, sweeping his gaze over to Qin Wentian and the others as he stated, if you guys kneel down and kowtow to Gretchen in apology, I will spare your lowly lives today. Wang Chang's gaze flickered with a hint of mockery. He truly couldn't understand why these people in front of him would have the courage to talk back to Gretchen. But of course, he was more than happy to see such a situation. If not, how would he have the chance to show off? Ever since Gretchen became a second-level weaponsmith, there were many who wanted to form a relationship with her. Scram! An indifferent voice drifted over. Wang Chang's countenance stiffened. Who was so audacious to tell him to scram? Shifting his gaze over, he saw a young man drinking from a gourd of wine. That voice earlier had originated from his mouth. Wang Chang's countenance stiffened as his countenance turned ashen. Immortal drunken wine, this matter has nothing to do with you. Wang Chong coldly stated. I can't stand it, can I? Immortal drunken wine laughed in a carefree manner. Even if I don't tell you to scram, there will be others who will. Since Gretchen has a grudge with them, you should settle it yourself. If you dare to make a move, the one kneeling here today will definitely be you. Immortal drunken wine shook his wine gourd as he said this, before adding in a depressed tone, oh no, there's no more wine. The crowd was speechless. This fellow's words were really too big. After we settle this matter, I will treat you to a drink. Qin Wendian smiled as he looked at Immortal drunken wine. Immortal drunken wine's eyes lit up as he laughed, since you said it, don't go back on your words. My alcohol tolerance isn't small. Don't worry about getting drunk. Qin Wendian laughed as well. He really liked Immortal drunken wine's personality. Towards someone he liked, they could become friends. Good, it seems like I can drink big today. Immortal drunken wine was filled with anticipation. He knew that the 60 yuan meteor stones contributed by Gretchen earlier was half of Qin Wendian's share. Chapter 56. The two of them chatted as though no one else was present, causing Gretchen's countenance to grow increasingly unhappy. She didn't expect that Immortal drunken wine would actually help Qin Wendian. The third-ranked prodigy of the royal capital, Immortal drunken wine, wasn't an existence that could be trifled with. I didn't expect to find a backer so quickly. Gretchen indifferently glanced at Qin Wendian. But, do you really think that I need a helper to deal with you? When Murin and Gretchen were in the Sky Harmony City, they had already investigated Qin Wendian thoroughly. At that time, Qin Wendian had displayed outstanding talent, condensing an astral soul from the third heavenly layer, and had even used some special methods to kill Yilang. Now that 3 months had passed, even if Qin Wendian's strength had improved a little, what could he do? As for the demonic ape that appeared in the Star River Association, Murin told her that it was a summoned astral war beast. It was highly possible that it was a life-saving talisman left behind by the ancestor of the Qin clan, the Wu King. What kind of talent can a clan that's on the verge of collapse nurture? Gretchen coldly laughed, as she turned and commanded, leave. Although Gretchen was arrogant, she wasn't so arrogant that she would directly make a move in the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Those beside Gretchen all laughed as they stared at Qin Wendian, with expressions of ridicule on their faces. What a reckless fool. Interesting. The surrounding spectators all had the attitude of watching a good show. Qin Wendian and the rest lifted their feet as they asked Francis, are all weaponsmiths so arrogant? Powerful weaponsmiths all have an innate arrogance. Francis laughed, I was just a first-level weaponsmith in the past, but you've seen me before. As he spoke, Francis looked at Qin Wendian with some embarrassment. Qin Wendian laughed. Indeed, when he first met Francis, this fellow was also extremely arrogant in front of him. After exiting the Divine Weapon Pavilion, Gretchen turned around and stared at Qin Wendian, as a cold light flashed in her eyes. Earlier, Qin Wendian had intentionally bid against her, causing her to suffer a great loss. Just this point alone was enough for Qin Wendian to pay with his life. She wants to kill. Fan Li's eyes narrowed. This woman wasn't simply arrogant. Her heart was extremely vicious as well. She actually wanted to kill him. Buzz. All of a sudden, Gretchen moved. Her movements were graceful and agile, as fast as lightning. A ray of sword light bloomed abruptly, revealing a chilling intent. The sword slashed directly at Qin Wendian's body. What a fast sword. The crowd was stunned. Gretchen wanted to kill Qin Wentian. A terrifying aura emanated from Qin Wentian's palm. After cultivating the 1,000-hand imprint for so long, it was time for him to put it into practice. With a stomp of his foot, the ground trembled. Qin Wentian's entire being seemed to be filled with explosive strength as he directly blasted out a palm strike. A terrifying palm imprint exuded a fearsome might as golden light radiated from it. This was none other than the first stance of the 1,000 Hands imprint, the adamantine imprint. Gretchen's sword, condensed from astral energy, directly exploded. She didn't even have the time to unleash the full might of her sword technique before she was completely suppressed. The 1,000 Hands imprint was known for its tyrannical attacks. Not only that, Qin Wentian's astral energy originated from the 5th heavenly layer, along with the tyrannical might of the heavenly hammer constellation. Even if he didn't use his divine yuan energy, the power of his attacks would still be extremely terrifying. Boom, boom. Qin Wentian stomped on the ground as he dashed towards Gretchen. Both his palms simultaneously blasted out as 2 terrifying imprints pressed downwards. Gretchen's countenance instantly paled. She immediately pulled out the origin sword she had just obtained, and at the same time, released her sword-type astral soul. Single slash sword light blossomed, forcefully shattering one of the adamantine imprints. However, the other palm imprint closed in on her, and she could only hurriedly raise her hands in response. A muffled boom rang out, and Gretchen felt as though her arms were about to shatter. At the same time, fresh blood seeped out from the corners of her mouth. Qin Wentian didn't give Gretchen any chance to retaliate. The roars of a dragon echoed out as an enraged dragon's arm directly snatched away the origin sword in Gretchen's hands. After which, a fist smashed into Gretchen's body, causing Gretchen to be flung through the air as she fell heavily onto the ground. The battle ended in an instant. The spectators were all dumbfounded as they watched the results of the battle. This fellow's attacks were too tyrannical. After seizing the initiative, he unleashed a torrent of attacks that directly destroyed Gretchen. Wang Chong and the rest dashed forward, only to see Immortal Drunken Wine taking a step forward as a terrifying sword chi enveloped the entire space, causing Wang Chong and the rest to freeze in place. At the same time, Qin Wentian had already arrived in front of Gretchen. Standing there, he lowered his head and looked down at Gretchen, who was sitting on the ground. A faint smile could be seen on his face as he held the origin sword in his hands. As long as he pierced downwards, Gretchen would definitely die. I really don't understand what you have to be so proud of. Qin Wentian calmly stated. Traces of mockery could be seen in his eyes, piercing into Gretchen's heart. She had never suffered such humiliation before. But today, she was defeated by her opponent. She had nothing to say. The pain of being defeated, as well as this humiliation, was extremely painful. Immortal Drunken Wine, if something really happens to Gretchen, I'm afraid you won't be able to bear the consequences. Wang Chong coldly stared at Immortal Drunken Wine, who was blocking his path, before shifting his gaze onto Qin Wentian. And you, take your sword away. Immortal Drunken Wine laughed. If I were you, I would immediately shut my mouth. If not, if he really killed Gretchen, things wouldn't be too good. Gretchen is a student of the Royal Academy, and a second-level weaponsmith from the Star River Association. Wang Chong coldly stated. A month ago, he killed Orphan in front of Orkan and many other elders of the Emperor Star Academy. If you continue to anger him, don't blame me for not warning you. Immortal Drunken Wine casually shrugged his shoulders. Qin Wentian from the Emperor Star Academy. The countenance of a student from the Royal Academy stiffened. Evidently, the news of Qin Wentian's deeds in the Emperor Star Academy had long been spread throughout the Royal Academy. It was only because a month had passed that Gretchen, who had just returned to the Academy, didn't know about it. He killed Orphan. Gretchen sat up, staring at her companion as she asked. Yes, in the Emperor Star Academy's ranking competition, in front of everyone on the arena. That person nodded his head, glancing at Qin Wentian as he continued. Not only that, his 2 astral souls originated from the 3rd and 4th heavenly layers respectively. The Emperor's Star Academy only confined him for a month. Gretchen's countenance turned strange as she stared at the smiling youth. In just a span of 3 months, he had already completed his transformation. Can I trouble you to pass this message to Murin that I will find him for that debt in the future? Scram now. Qin Wendian tossed the origin sword to the ground, as Gretchen stood up and left in a sorry state. Qin Wendian had actually entered the Emperor's Star Academy, and had such talent. This caused a huge impact to her heart. Qin Wendian didn't kill Gretchen. He was very clear of his current situation in the royal capital. The Yi clan and the O clan had no leeway to salvage the situation. Although he had already entered the Emperor's Star Academy, he didn't think that he would be able to rest easy. On the contrary, there were many people who wanted him dead. Regardless of the Emperor's Star Academy, the Divine Weapon Pavilion, or even immortal drunken wine, this wasn't his own strength. Only when he was strong enough to contend against everything would he have the qualifications to do whatever he wanted. Qin Wendian shifted his gaze towards immortal drunken wine, only to see immortal drunken wine laughing. Care about being drunk? Care about being drunk. Qin Wendian smiled as he nodded his head. Where are we going? Wherever we go. You just have to pay the bill. Immortal drunken wine laughed. Qin Wendian shrugged his shoulders as he turned to Sheena and Fan Lu. Fatty, what about the two of you? Hee hee. Fatty blinked his eyes as he laughed. How about this, Sheena, you go pick a divine weapon and put it on Boss tab. I will go out with Boss for a walk. This. Sheena stared at Qin Wendian in bewilderment. Francis, bring Sheena along. Just put it on my tab. Qin Wendian spoke to Francis as he rolled his eyes at Fatty. This damnable Fatty kept calling him boss every day, he would have to pay the price for it. Sheena, there's no need to be so polite with boss. Fatty had a wretched smile on his face. He had personally witnessed the wealth of weaponsmiths. In the future, he would definitely extort more from them. Francis brought Sheena to the Divine Weapon Pavilion, while Qin Wendian and the other two headed in another direction. Fatty sized up immortal drunken wine as he asked, ranked third among the 10 prodigies of the royal capital, you should be very strong, right? Not bad. Immortal drunken wine looked at Fatty with interest. If that's the case, after drinking, we will all be brothers. If I need your help in a fight, it shouldn't be a problem, right? Fatty's eyes lit up, while Qin Wendian rolled his eyes. This fellow's calculations were quite good. If he could invite immortal drunken wine for a fight, killing Orkan wouldn't be a problem at all. As long as you get drunk, there's no problem in fighting. Just don't make me kick an iron board. Immortal drunken wine laughed as he replied. Fatty's eyes lit up. Qin Wendian, when are you able to forge a second-level high-grade origin sword? Remember to give me one. Immortal drunken wine looked at Qin Wendian. No problem. Qin Wendian nodded his head. Immortal drunken wine had a carefree personality, he didn't mind asking him for a divine weapon. If it was an ordinary person, they would have definitely avoided it. Back at the Knights Association, Orkan, Murongfeng, and the rest were gathered together. Orkan stared at Murongfeng as he spoke. Today, a battle took place outside the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Qin Wendian's cultivation has already broken through to the second level of arterial circulation. Not only that, Mustang should have imparted to him the Earth-grade innate technique, the Thousand Hands imprint. He has already mastered the first stance of the diamond imprint. Do you think he can threaten me? Murongfeng stared at Orkan. At the very least, we can't be too careless. Back then in the dark forest, I thought he would die, but in the end, the one who died was my younger brother. We can't let go of this opportunity. I will give you an Earth-grade innate technique for you to cultivate. Also, do you want to raise your Emperor's Star Jade Medallion to the 5th level? Murongfeng's eyes narrowed. With a 5th-grade Emperor's Star Jade Medallion, he would be able to enjoy even better cultivation resources. To him, this was undoubtedly a great temptation. However, he didn't have enough Yuan meteor stones. Of course. Murong Feng nodded. In a battle on the platform, it's hard to avoid situations where one cannot hold back. If Qin Wentian is crippled, I can guarantee that you will be able to reach the 5th level. A cold light flickered in Orkan's eyes. As long as he crippled Qin Wentian, the Emperor's Star Academy would no longer nurture trash. Qin Wentian would die without a doubt. The Yi clan and O clan would be willing to provide the 300 yuan meteor stones. Murong Feng's eyes narrowed. The academy wanted him to take the risk. If he really crippled Qin Wentian, what would the Emperor's Star Academy's attitude be? This is a fair battle. With us here, the Emperor's Star Academy won't make things difficult for a genius for the sake of a crippled Qin Wentian. Orkan's eyes were as cold as ice. Upon hearing his words, Murong Feng's eyes flickered with a ruthless glint. Chapter 57. Qin Wentian and Fan Lo were escorted back to the Emperor's Star Academy by Immortal Drunken Wine and Francis. Immortal Drunken Wine carried a wine gourd in his hands as he watched the two of them stagger into the academy, with a snow-white puppy following behind them. The corners of his mouth curled up in a slight smile. "Don't lose the Yuan meteor stones on you," Francis mumbled. Immortal Drunken Wine knew that Qin Wentian was heading to the Divine Weapon Pavilion for the Yuan meteor stones. Hence, after drinking, he first sent Qin Wentian and Fan Lo back to the Divine Weapon Pavilion. Francis then passed the Yuan meteor stones to Qin Wentian before sending them back to the Emperor's Star Academy. "Don't worry, he's not completely drunk." Immortal Drunken Wine laughed. These two fellows were extremely interesting, especially Fatty Fan Lo. Even when he was drunk, he still kept on shouting, "Beautiful girls." Qin Wentian and Fan Lo were indeed drunk. They were only 16 years of age, and although they had experienced many setbacks, their personalities were still hot-blooded. How could they not be able to control their alcohol tolerance when encountering someone like Immortal Drunken Wine? What kind of person was Immortal Drunken Wine? How could he possibly get drunk? Hence, the ones who were drunk were naturally Qin Wentian and Fan Lo. "Brother, didn't you say that Immortal Drunken Wine was also called the Wine Immortal? He obediently sent us back because he was afraid of us." Fatty laughed as he hugged Qin Wentian. Scram! Qin Wentian, who was still being hugged by Fatty, kicked him away. "Damn Fatty, don't treat me like a beautiful girl." "Brother, you win." "I, Fatty, like you, like men." "So what?" Fan Lo grinned at Qin Wentian, causing goosebumps to appear all over Qin Wentian's body. He hurriedly distanced himself from Fatty. The students who were passing by heard Fatty's words, all pursed their lips and laughed. One of the girls couldn't help but laugh out loud. Weren't these two famous freshmen? Why were they so drunk? And that Fatty, he actually liked men. "What are you laughing at? Beautiful lady, do you want to have some fun with Brother Fatty?" Fatty said to a beautiful female student beside him, reeking of alcohol. The female student screamed in fear and ran away. "You damn Fatty, you're going to be famous, haha." Qin Wentian laughed out loud. Unfortunately, his drunken words were spot on. Fatty was indeed famous. The two of them staggered back to the dormitory and fell asleep. When they woke up the next day, Fatty shivered. He looked at Qin Wentian, who was standing beside him, and asked, "Did anything happen yesterday?" "No." Qin Wentian shook his head. "That's good. Why did I dream that I was talking nonsense?" Fatty scratched his head and stretched lazily as he walked towards the exit. At the side, someone glanced over and smiled at Fan Lo. "Brother Fatty, you're awake." Fatty's expression flickered. Why were these fellows so enthusiastic today? They actually took the initiative to greet him. "Brother Fatty, look at the guys here. Which one do you like the most?" Another person teased. Fatty's face reddened. Could it be that his dream was real? "Bullshit, I like women, beautiful ladies." Fatty cursed. The other students all laughed. "We understand." Qin Wendian walked towards the crowd. He had decided to draw a line between him and Fatty. Boss. Fatty pitifully chased after Qin Wendian, causing Qin Wendian to feel a chill run down his spine. Qin Wendian, Fan Le, there's a public lecture today, and the teacher is a beautiful guest elder. Do you guys want to join us? Someone smiled at Qin Wendian and Fan Le. Beautiful elder. Fatty's eyes instantly lit up. Of course we'll go. Let's go together then. The group of them laughed as they arrived at an empty space. There were many bluestone praying mats on this empty space, and in front of them, there was a tall platform. This place was known as the lecture platform. Not every student had the opportunity to become the disciple of an elder. Hence, the academy would often arrange for guest elders to give lectures on cultivation. Today, there were many new students gathered at the lecture platform. The silhouettes of the youths were filled with vigor. Elder Rain is here. At this moment, the gazes of the crowd shifted to the front. Rain was clad in a long green dress, exuding a dignified and beautiful aura. There weren't many adornments on her body, but she was clean and tidy. Coupled with her dignified facial features and fair skin, she gave off a sense of otherworldliness. She was so beautiful that a commotion broke out. Mature goddess. Fatty sat on the lecture platform. His eyes shone with a bright light, as though his eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. Rain sat cross-legged on the lecture platform, gazing at the students below. Her clear voice rang out, "The majority of you are either at the upper 3 levels of the body refinement realm or at the arterial circulation realm. Today, I will be lecturing on some knowledge regarding the arterial circulation realm. Okay, we will listen to whatever teacher says." The crowd below cheered. You guys should all be very clear that the human body is a vessel with unlimited potential. This vessel can expand unceasingly. The first level of Wu Xiu's cultivation is body refinement. His goal is to refine a perfect body. Only when one's body is perfect, would they be able to cultivate better. The body refinement realm is actually the foundational realm, and it's used to lay the foundation for the arterial circulation realm. However, is the so-called perfect body in the body refinement realm truly perfect? Obviously, this is just a saying. As Wu Xiu's cultivation base grows stronger, our bodies are also continuously perfected. There is no end to this. There are some body refinement realm cultivators whose bodies can split apart mountains and split apart seas. The arterial circulation realm is the sublimation of the body refinement realm. After opening up the arterial pathways, every part of the human body can be connected through the arterial circulation pathway. The arterial circulation pathway connects the head, heart, limbs, and every other part of the body. When we cultivate, the astral energy will circulate through the arterial circulation pathway, continuing to temper our physical body. When we battle, the astral energy will flow through the arterial circulation pathway to every part of the body. Sharp eyes, strong vision, sharp ears, strong hearing. But when we fight, we would usually use our hands and feet because the majority of the innate techniques you guys cultivate are released through your hands and feet. But what about those with special astral souls or those with terrifying strength? A single glance from them can even bewitch a person's heart. A single breath from them can even kill. So, you guys shouldn't be too limited. Open up your thoughts, and when you cultivate, use the astral energy to circulate around your body, tempering every single part of your body. At the same time, you should constantly open up your arterial circulation pathway, increasing the capacity of your astral energy to the point where you can open up new arterial circulation pathways. Of course, you have to adjust your cultivation methods according to your astral souls, choosing cultivation arts, innate techniques. As Rain's gentle voice continued to echo out, the entire space gradually quietened down. Everyone listened attentively. Her voice seemed to contain a magical power, drawing the crowd into an ocean of knowledge about cultivation. Because of Uncle Black's guidance, Qin Wendian had a deeper understanding of the basics of cultivation compared to the rest. But even so, he was still engrossed in Rain's lecture. No one's cultivation philosophy was perfect. Listening more, thinking more, and comprehending more would naturally be beneficial to one's cultivation. This lecture lasted for 4 hours. When Rain left, many people were reluctant to part, as though they wanted to listen to her lecture for a longer period of time. I want to woo my goddess. Fatty looked at Rain's departing silhouette with nostalgia in his eyes. Wake up, Elder Su can kill you with a single slap. Qin Wentian glared at Fatty, causing an expression of depression to appear on Fatty's face. It seemed like he still had to work hard in his cultivation. There's still 10 days left. Are you guys ready? At this moment, a voice abruptly drifted over. Qin Wentian and Fan Le turned their gazes over, only to see Murong Feng and Du Hao standing there with hints of provocation in their eyes. When the surrounding crowd saw the two of them, expressions of interest appeared on their faces. They knew that in the remaining 10 days, between these 4 people, there would be an earth-shattering battle. This battle would definitely garner a lot of attention from the masses. Do I even need to prepare to deal with you guys? Fan Le laughed. Your mouth sure is tough. Du Hao coldly snorted. Murong Feng rubbed his chin as he stared at Qin Wentian. I heard that you've cultivated an earth-grade innate technique. I hope you won't disappoint me too much when the time comes. There's no meaning in a one-sided battle. After speaking, Murong Feng and Du Hao turned and departed. At the instant they turned, Murong Feng's eyes flashed with an extremely cold light. Evidently, he had already made up his mind regarding Orkan's plan. How arrogant, Fan Le murmured as he watched the two of them depart. Fatty, it's about time for you to work hard. If not, you'll lose all your face when the time comes. Qin Wentian lifted his foot as a faint smile appeared on his face. He had to win this battle no matter what. This was only the beginning. Qin Wentian would never forget the cruel and merciless treatment they had given Fatty in the Dreamsky Forest. Chapter 58. Within the Emperor's Star Academy, there were places for students to cultivate, and even places for them to spar. However, they preferred to head to the City of Illusions to temper themselves. It was more exciting, and they could unleash their full strength without any reservations. However, Qin Wentian didn't head to the City of Illusions. Instead, he chose to cultivate in his own dreamscape. At this moment, on a vast and empty land, only Qin Wentian stood there, unceasingly blasting out palm imprints. The diamond imprint is tyrannical, indestructible, while the revolving sea imprint is a combination of hardness and softness. Sometimes, it's like the calm waters of the sea, and sometimes, it's like a gigantic tidal wave, breaking apart everything. Hardness contains softness, softness contains hardness. Qin Wentian murmured, as he unceasingly blasted out palm after palm, yet he was still unable to comprehend the essence of the revolving sea imprint. Sadly, I have yet to reach the dreamscape realm. If not, I would be able to create an ocean in my own dreamscape, allowing me to personally experience it. Qin Wentian mused, as he unceasingly blasted out his palms. He didn't know how many palms he had blasted out, but the sound of slapping rang out, causing Qin Wentian's eyes to widen in surprise. One round after another, just like the arterial pathways in my body. Advancing layer by layer, the instant the energy reaches my palms, it will explode forth, unleashing a supreme might. Qin Wentian's eyes brightened. Drawing in a deep breath, he slowly pushed out with his palms. This time around, his palms were very slow, yet it brought forth a gust of wind, as though the waves were stacking together unceasingly. Softness, this is the feeling of softness. Yes, it's exactly like this. At the very last instant, the waves stack together, and at the very end, the explosive force is as violent as a tsunami. A smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face. He had finally comprehended the essence of the revolving sea imprint. After a long period of time, Qin Wentian blasted out with his palms. His palms were like towering waves, emitting a terrifying crashing sound. And this wasn't even infused with astral energy. After familiarizing himself with the revolving sea imprint, Qin Wendian used his dreams as a guide, allowing his consciousness to enter the tiny astral being. However, there was no reaction. These few days, because he had many Yuan meteor stones on hand, Qin Wendian unceasingly tried to pry into the memories of the tiny astral being. However, he gradually discovered that if he wanted to allow his consciousness to enter the internal space of the tiny astral being, it didn't require too much astral energy. However, the internal space he was in right now was as vast as the starry skies. Within the starry skies, there were many astral fragments, each of which could absorb astral energy. Hence, he had to use Yuan meteor stones to open it up. This change caused Qin Wendian to feel that this tiny astral being was extremely unique. Naturally, Qin Wendian had also attempted to not enter the internal space of the tiny astral being. Instead, he attempted to directly use astral energy to light up the tiny astral being. However, he discovered that the tiny astral being now was like a bottomless pit. It was easy to use his consciousness to enter, but if he wanted to light up the tiny astral being, he would need to expend a huge amount of Yuan meteor stones. This caused Qin Wendian to feel an immense pressure. Even with his current wealth, he wouldn't be able to afford it. Let's first take a look at these astral fragments and see what memories they contain. With a single thought, Qin Wendian allowed astral energy to flow into the starry skies, seeping into one of the astral fragments that Qin Wendian's consciousness was attached to. Although this was only a dream, as long as his consciousness guided it, he would be able to draw in astral energy. Naturally, the prerequisite was that Qin Wendian had to have Yuan meteor stones in his possession in the outside world. Cultivating in a dream would not be able to create a fake existence, at least not at the shallow dreamscape level. Gradually, the astral fragment glowed brighter and brighter. Finally, a beam of light flashed as a stream of memories flowed into Qin Wendian's body, jolting his consciousness out of his body. Shaking his head, Qin Wendian awoke from his dream with a start. However, he immediately closed his eyes as he tried to sense the memories. This time around, it was the same as the previous time in the Qin Heavenly Divine Sect. What Qin Wendian saw were still images, not words. Cultivation arts, innate techniques, or weaponsmithing knowledge, they were all memories related to words. Back then, when Qin Wendian was in the Qin Heavenly Divine Sect, he saw images. This time around, it was the same as well. In this image, he saw an extremely terrifying empire. The atmosphere within the imperial palace was majestic and majestic. Qin Wendian didn't even dare to imagine the majestic aura it exuded. Numerous stone pillars stood erect, piercing through the clouds. That imperial palace was even larger than Sky Harmony City, and the number of experts within were as many as the clouds. In front of such an empire, the Chu country was like an ant. This was the feeling Qin Wendian had when he saw it. Qin Wendian once again saw the silhouette of the middle-aged man from the Qin Heavenly Divine Sect. He stood on the towering stone pillar outside the imperial palace, laughing arrogantly at the heavens. With a wave of his hand, the heavens and earth were turned upside down. In the memory, an extremely beautiful woman appeared. That woman was directly brought away by the middle-aged man, and those who dared to obstruct him either died or were killed. Nobody could obstruct him. This seemed to have verified a saying that Qin Wendian had heard before. When one's strength reached a certain level, a single person could be the law of an entire country. In this vast world, I am the most unfettered, tyrannical, doing whatever I want. I am the heavens, I am the law. When Qin Wendian exited the memory, he still couldn't calm the shock in his heart. Too strong. Compared to the empire, the Chu country could only be considered a small country. That middle-aged man could destroy the entire Chu country with a stomp of his feet. No wonder Uncle Black told me that this is the world of stellar martial cultivators. Sky Harmony City is too small, and the Chu country is also too small. Qin Wendian drew in a deep breath, as waves of emotions surged in his heart. However, he also understood that although the Chu country couldn't be considered anything in the grand scheme of things, right now, he couldn't be considered anything in the Chu country. If he wanted to grow stronger, he had to take things one step at a time, and not bite off more than he could chew. Old fogey, who are you exactly? And what is this tiny astral being you left behind for me? Inclining his head and staring at the air, Qin Wendian thought of the middle-aged man. There were many scenes of that middle-aged man in his memory. Could he be the old fogey? If that was the case, had his old fogey really died? Who? Exhaling a turbid breath, Qin Wendian silently mused, if I were to light up the tiny astral being once again, what kind of surprise would it bring me? Qin Wendian really wanted to give it a try, but the date of the duel was getting nearer and nearer. The most important thing to do now was to condense the astral energy in his body into divine imprints. This process would require the consumption of a large number of yuan meteor stones. Cultivation is difficult. Wanting to cultivate a tyrannical innate technique is even more difficult. Not only must one rely on talent, one must also have the support of an enormous amount of resources. Qin Wendian murmured in his heart. In his heart, he was already thinking that after a period of time, he would have to consider forging more divine weapons to sell. The spirit refinement method was a divine art that used divine imprints to condense true energy. The first level of the spirit refinement method was to instantly condense a large amount of astral energy into a first-level divine imprint. As he continued to cultivate the spirit refinement method, his comprehension of divine imprints would only grow stronger and stronger. Time flowed by, and Qin Wendian continued to immerse himself in the condensation of divine energy. Not only that, after the condensation of divine energy, he would circulate the divine energy through his stellar meridians, unceasingly tempering every part of his body. From Rain's lecture, Qin Wendian was able to absorb some useful knowledge. If this continued for 1 or 2 times, it wouldn't be of much use. However, after 100 times, or even 1,000 times, he discovered that there were some changes occurring within his body. Not only was Qin Wendian diligent in his cultivation, even Fan Lu was extremely diligent, not bothering Qin Wendian at all. Although Fan Lu appeared to be frivolous on the surface, he was actually extremely serious about this battle. The cruel lesson he had received in the City of Illusions was deeply engraved in his mind. Even if Fan Lu didn't say anything, Qin Wendian would understand. Every time he thought about how the members of the Knights Association had pierced a long spear into Fan Li's body, stirring the insides of Fan Li's body, an intense desire to kill would rise up in Qin Wendian's heart. This debt must be repaid with blood. And while Qin Wendian and Fan Lu were diligently cultivating, over at the Knights Association, Murong Feng and Du Hao weren't idle either. Ever since Qin Wendian killed Orphan and unleashed his innate talent, Orphan knew that the person he had once looked down on had already become a threat to him. Not only that, it wouldn't be as easy to eradicate Qin Wendian anymore. This was such a good opportunity, how could he give it up? On the training grounds, Murong Feng and Du Hao were fighting against a few other members of the Knights Association. The attacks from both sides were extremely violent. Not bad. Murong Feng is indeed a rare genius. His Space Render Fist is tyrannical, capable of rupturing meridians and rupturing internal organs. It's the same as the Thousand Hands Imprint, a mid-tier Earth-grade innate technique. The only difference is that the Space Render Fist isn't divided into several stances. The deeper one's comprehension of it, the greater the destructive power they can unleash. A member of the Knights Association standing beside Orphan coldly laughed. Orphan's countenance was calm, yet a terrifying coldness flickered in the depths of his eyes. This Space Render Fist was something he had specially prepared for Qin Wendian, and he had given it to both Murong Feng and Du Hao. This fist technique was extremely tyrannical and ruthless, capable of directly rupturing the meridians and internal organs of one's opponent. Murong Feng's cultivation base was already much higher than Qin Wendian's. If he were to practice this tyrannical and ruthless fist technique, he would definitely be able to suppress Qin Wendian, who had a lower cultivation base than him. That's not enough. I'll still prepare a trump card for Murong Feng, just in case. Qin Wendian, Fan Lu, prepare yourselves for the pain of being crippled. Orphan's lips curled into a smile. Even if he felt that victory was already in his grasp, he still had to make ample preparations. Chapter 59. Today, there were many people gathered in the training grounds of the Emperor Star Academy. Among these people, there were two groups of people that stood out the most. They stood at the forefront of the training grounds, staring at each other with hostility. The Knights Association and the Green Cloud Association. Today was the day of their battle. Murong Feng and Du Hao had already arrived. They had already joined the Knights Association, becoming one of their members. Still not here. Murong Feng slowly walked up, standing on the training grounds with his hands clasped behind his back. Du Hao followed behind him. Although he was only 16 years of age, the current Murong Feng already had a trace of the aura of an expert. Just by standing there, he gave off a feeling of being revered by a mountain. 16 years of age, dual astral souls, 4th level of the arterial circulation realm, the top student of the Emperor Star Academy. Murong Feng seems to be very confident. The crowd murmured in their hearts. Qin Wentian is here. At this moment, from afar, a few silhouettes could be seen walking over. The person in the lead was none other than Qin Wentian and Fan Luo. They directly walked towards Luo Huan from the Green Cloud Association. Senior sister. Qin Wentian smiled. Are you confident? Luo Huan's lips curled up in a charming smile, causing the hearts of others to go wild. I'll do my best. Qin Wentian laughed. Although he said this, he still had some confidence in his heart, despite the fact that his cultivation base was still far from Murong Feng's. I'm filled with anticipation. Go on. Luo Huan laughed. Qin Wentian and Fan Luo walked up the training grounds, staring at the two silhouettes in front of them. Upon seeing the two of them, Murong Feng indifferently stated, since this is a battle, injuries are bound to occur. What if I accidentally injure the two of you? The eyes of Qin Wentian and Fan Luo narrowed. This Murong Feng was extremely confident. You better worry about yourself. Qin Wentian replied. Is that so? Murong Feng laughed. If you can injure me, it's because I'm useless. I guarantee that the Academy will not pursue this matter. It's the same for me. If I lose, it doesn't matter even if I die. But what about the rest of you? Du Hao's eyes gleamed with sharpness as he stared at Qin Wentian and Qin Wentian, causing the crowd below to be startled. Du Hao had come prepared, he wanted Qin Wentian and Fan Luo to sign a life and death contract. Naturally, it was impossible for Qin Wentian to die, as the Emperor Star Academy wouldn't allow it. However, if Qin Wentian's strength was too great, he might even be crippled. Qin Wentian stared at Murong Feng and Du Hao. How could he not understand the meaning behind their words? Are you guys sure? Qin Wentian was silent for a moment before he finally spoke. If you wish for me to show mercy, I can consider it. Murong Feng's gaze was filled with provocation. Qin Wentian looked at him for a moment and then nodded. In that case, let's fight. In the past, Qin Wentian didn't have much enmity with Murong Feng and Du Hao. But since they were already prepared to kill him, Qin Wentian naturally understood what he had to do. This battle will be the worst decision you'll ever make in your entire life. Murong Feng's calm voice contained an intense self-confidence. As the sound of his voice faded, he released both of his astral souls. In the air above his head, two astral shadows appeared. One was a lion, the other was a gigantic eagle. The two astral souls Murong Feng had chosen were both demonic beast astral souls. The lion astral soul granted him immense strength, while the gigantic eagle astral soul granted him terrifying attacks and agility. Murong Feng's body contained the unique characteristics of both demonic beasts. At this moment, Murong Feng's eyes were as wild as a demonic beast's, unexcelled in the world. Not only that, the aura he exuded was that of a cultivator at the 4th level of arterial circulation. Du Hao also released his astral souls. One of them was a tempest, while the other was a saber that shone with a cold light. However, the tempest wasn't too intense. Du Hao's astral soul was condensed from an astral soul from the first heavenly layer, while his saber astral soul was condensed from an astral soul from the second heavenly layer. Fan Lu also released his archery astral soul. In his hands, an astral bow appeared, with 3 astral arrows knocked on the bowstring, ready to be released. How do we play? Fan Lu grinned as he looked at Qin Wentian. Can you handle Du Hao? Qin Wentian asked. No pressure. The corners of Fan Li's mouth curled up in a confident smile, causing Du Hao to coldly snort in response. Fine, leave Murong Feng to me. A radiant smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face as he released his heavenly hammer astral soul. Second level of arterial circulation. Murong Feng shook his head and laughed. However, in the next instant, his silhouette abruptly sprinted forwards. In an instant, the quiet Murong Feng disappeared, replaced by a berserk aura. He dashed forwards at an incredible speed, causing a violent gust of wind to kick up. Leaping into the air, Murong Feng was akin to a hawk soaring through the skies. After which, he abruptly slashed out with his claws, aiming for Qin Wentian below him. The razor-sharp claws unceasingly slashed towards Qin Wentian, containing a terrifying demonic aura. Qin Wentian lifted his hands, and with a draconic roar, the dragon's subduing fist transformed into a ferocious azure dragon, tearing apart everything. At the same time, Murong Feng's silhouette descended from the skies. His sharp claws transformed into fists of light as the roars of a lion echoed out. His fists tore apart the void as he smashed towards Qin Wentian. In that instant, Qin Wentian sensed a trace of danger. He slashed out with the first stance of the Thousand Hands imprint, the diamond imprint. A deafening sound echoed out as the yuan energy in the air exploded. Murong Feng's fists continued to press downwards, clashing against Qin Wentian's palms. Qin Wentian only felt the arterial pathways in his arms trembling unceasingly, as though they were about to shatter. Taking a step forward, Qin Wentian's body rebounded backwards. His feet scraped against the ground, emitting a chi-chi sound. The terrifying energy within his body continued to wreak havoc. What a powerful innate technique, the grade of it isn't any lower than the Thousand Hands imprint. Qin Wentian was at a disadvantage. Murong Feng was 2 levels higher than him, and he was also using a mid-tier Earth-grade innate technique. This battle wasn't going to be easy. Space Render Fist. Below the platform, Luo Huan's countenance was extremely unsightly. Murong Feng had actually cultivated the Space Render Fist to the extent that it could unleash its aura. This battle was going to be a little dangerous. She couldn't help but worry for Qin Wentian. Even if Qin Wentian had an advantage in terms of astral souls and astral energy, there was still a gap of 2 levels between them. On the other side, the battle between Du Hao and Fan Lu had also erupted. Du Hao wielded an astral saber in his hands, which was imbued with the power of wind, causing his saber to be incomparably swift and ethereal. Other than that, Du Hao's speed was also extremely fast, making him extremely difficult to deal with. 200 yuan meteor stones. Is the Green Cloud Association ready? Orkan's gaze shifted to Luo Huan. 200 second heavenly layer yuan meteor stones, this amount was more than enough to make the Green Cloud Association suffer. Luo Huan swept a glance at Orkan, before shifting her gaze onto Qin Wentian, who was standing on the platform. She murmured in her heart, "Little fellow, it's all up to you now." There are many people watching this battle. Although this was a battle between the Knights Association and the Green Cloud Association, the main characters of this battle were 2 unique. Qin Wentian. His astral souls were extremely tyrannical, and he was the strongest in the history of the Emperor's Star Academy. His future achievements were immeasurable. Murong Feng, a rare genius of the Emperor's Star Academy. At the age of 16, he already had a talent at the 4th level of arterial circulation. Not only that, Luo Huan had also heard of some rumors, but she didn't know if it was true or false. If it was true, Qin Wentian would be in grave danger in this battle. Hence, with regards to this battle, there were many spectators who were watching it. On the platform. The Thousand Hands imprint, is it very strong? I've said it before, this battle will be the most regretful thing you will ever do in your life. Murong Feng slowly advanced, the aura exuding from him grew increasingly violent. An aura that could shatter everything gushed towards Qin Wentian. Seeing Murong Feng advancing step by step, the divine energy within Qin Wentian's body began to circulate. He had the most perfect arterial circulation, and the flow of astral energy within his body was much smoother compared to others. As long as Qin Wentian willed it, the speed of his attacks would be even faster than others. Oh! Qin Wentian laughed. Using the divine energy condensed from the astral energy of the Heavenly Hammer constellation, in addition to the Thousand Hands imprint, how powerful would it be? Qin Wentian had never fought in a real battle before. Boom! The ground abruptly trembled as Murong Feng lunged towards Qin Wentian. His strength was akin to that of a ferocious beast, and his agility was akin to that of a hawk. A terrifying astral wind gushed forth, slamming into Qin Wentian's body. Repent! Murong Feng's countenance was incomparably calm. This battle should have been won without any suspense. Rumble! Within Qin Wentian's body, a terrifying amount of divine energy frenziedly converged on his arms. Qin Wentian stood at his original position, and finally, he lifted his arms and struck out with the first stance of the Thousand Hands imprint, the diamond imprint. This time around, the diamond imprint was even more resplendent. The powerful ancient imprint contained a terrifying might, akin to a divine palm from the heavens, capable of crushing and shattering everything in its path. The attacks of the two collided together, causing a gigantic astral wind to sweep out in all directions. Scram! Qin Wentian spat out a stream of divine energy from his mouth. This divine energy actually transformed into a tyrannical palm imprint, directly slamming into Murong Feng's body, causing Murong Feng to retreat madly as he groaned in pain. As for Qin Wentian, he stood there unmoving, as steady as a mountain. Is that really the diamond imprint? How can it be so powerful? Luo Huan's countenance stiffened. She had naturally seen the Thousand Hands imprint before, but why was the diamond imprint unleashed by Qin Wentian so terrifying? Not only that, to be able to spit out a palm imprint, how smooth must one's meridians be? And how did one manage to condense it into a palm imprint? Luo Huan's heart trembled, but soon after, a charming smile appeared on her face. This junior brother of hers was truly becoming more and more likable. Chapter 60. One of the reasons why Qin Wentian was able to spit out palm imprints was naturally due to the divine energy within his body. The divine energy within his body was condensed from the divine imprints of palm imprints, and every strand of divine energy contained the might of a palm. As for the other reason, he had to thank Rain for her lecture. Qin Wentian's arterial circulation was the astral circulation pathway, and after that lecture, he tried to circulate the Yuan energy within his body through his arterial circulation pathway and discovered some miraculous effects. This was the reason why he was able to spit out palm imprints earlier. The spectators were all shocked when they saw Qin Wentian forcing Murong Feng back. They had thought that Murong Feng would be able to suppress Qin Wentian by relying on his superior cultivation base and the space render fist. That palm imprint earlier was so terrifying. I once saw a senior at the peak of the arterial circulation realm executing it. Although the might of that palm imprint was stronger, it wasn't as ferocious as Qin Wentian's. An old student murmured. It's indeed terrifying. If that's the case, it's hard to say who would be the victor. The spectators' interest grew. After being forced back, Murong Feng seriously scrutinized Qin Wentian. After which, a smile appeared on his face as he stated, only this way would things be interesting. At least I would be able to unleash my true strength. If not, wouldn't it be too boring? Murong Feng was still holding back earlier. Someone exclaimed in his heart. If that was the case, wasn't Murong Feng a little too terrifying? Do you know why I chose demonic beast-type astral souls? Murong Feng stared at Qin Wentian as he indifferently asked. I'm not interested. Qin Wentian replied. Hee, Next, let's properly experience it. This is the first time I've gone all out in a battle after entering the Emperor's Star Academy. Murong Feng calmly stated. Abruptly, a terrifying aura gushed forth from his body. His entire being was filled with the aura of a primordial beast. Bloodline. The hearts of the spectators violently pounded. The number 1 freshman, Murong Feng, had actually awakened the power of his bloodline. His talent was too terrifying. If that was the case, disregarding his cultivation base, just based on his innate talent alone, he had the qualifications to contend against Qin Wentian. No wonder he's so confident. Many people sighed in their hearts. Luo Huan's beautiful eyes flashed with an uneasy light when she saw this scene. It seemed like the rumors were true. Murong Feng actually possessed the power of a bloodline limit. If that was the case, Qin Wentian was truly in danger. Her heart was in her throat again. This is the Berserk Beast bloodline. You are the first person to make me use the power of my bloodline to fight. You already have the right to show off. Murong Feng stared at Qin Wentian. His body seemed to have grown larger, and the aura he exuded was extremely berserk, akin to that of a ferocious beast. Boom! Murong Feng took a step forward, causing the entire stage to tremble. Qin Wentian's countenance grew heavier as he stared at Murong Feng. After activating his bloodline of the Berserk Beast, Murong Feng's combat prowess had risen to another level. Evidently, Murong Feng's combat prowess had exceeded his expectations. But, so what? The aura Murong Feng exuded grew stronger and stronger. When he arrived in front of Qin Wentian felt that his opponent wasn't a human, but a completely berserk demonic beast. The Space Render fist was unleashed from Murong Feng's body. This time around, the might of his fist was terrifying. The roars of a lion and the cries of an eagle could be heard, and the surging force of his fist swept through everything, wanting to kill Qin Wentian on the spot. Qin Wentian's countenance was expressionless. However, the divine energy in his body was already boiling, akin to the ferocious roars of the ocean. Upon seeing Murong Feng's fist descending on him, Qin Wentian's palms continuously trembled, and in an instant, several palm imprints were formed. These palm imprints appeared incomparably gentle, yet very quickly, terrifying rumbling sounds could be heard. After which, the crowd saw the palm imprints howling, engulfing the heavens and the earth. Using divine energy to execute the revolving sea imprint instantly consumed an unknown amount of divine energy in Qin Wentian's body. However, the effect was also extremely terrifying. The entire space was engulfed by the palm imprints. Rumble. A terrifying force rumbled on the platform. Murong Feng only felt that the palm imprints he was facing were getting stronger and stronger. Not only that, Qin Wentian's attacks didn't stop. At this moment, it was as though Qin Wentian had gone berserk. Numerous revolving sea imprints blasted out, causing Murong Feng's Space Render fist to explode unceasingly. Finally, that tsunami-like palm imprint broke through everything, arriving in front of Murong Feng. The incomparably terrifying pressure caused Murong Feng's countenance to drastically change. With a howl of rage, he executed the Space Render fist to its limits. However, his body was still flung through the air as his countenance paled. Qin Wentian is so strong. The hearts of the crowd trembled. The combat prowess Qin Wentian displayed was simply too terrifying. That's the second move of the thousand-hand imprint, the revolving sea imprint. When executed by Qin Wentian, it was as though the waves of the ocean were truly roaring. That imprint technique was simply too cool. Bloodline? I really don't know. Where is your so-called capital to flaunt? A cold smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face as he stared at Murong Feng. However, at this moment, he understood in his heart that he had to end this battle as quickly as possible. The revolving sea imprint consumed too much divine energy, and he wouldn't be able to fight for a long period of time. Murong Feng's countenance gradually contorted as a ruthless glint flickered in his eyes. Today, he had truly lost face. Beautifully done. Beside him, Fan Lu, who had also ignited his bloodline limit, grinned at Qin Wentian. As he spoke, he didn't forget to shoot out a series of arrows in rapid succession, causing Du Hao to feel the urge to go crazy. After Fan Li's bloodline limit was awakened, the might of his arrows was even more tyrannical than before. Not only that, his control over his arrows had also improved, allowing him to continuously change directions, causing Du Hao to have no choice but to defend. Seems like there's no longer any suspense in this battle. Qin Wentian and Fan Lu will both be able to defeat their opponents. Many in the crowd mused in their hearts. The combat prowess of Qin Wentian and Fan Lu had completely exceeded their expectations. This was especially so for Qin Wentian. His thousand-hand imprint was on a completely different level compared to Murong Feng's Void Splitter Fist. Stop playing around. Orkan's countenance turned cold. This Qin Wentian's combat prowess had far exceeded his expectations. Luckily, he had prepared a trump card. As the sound of his voice faded, both Murong Feng and Du Hao nodded their heads lightly. After which, the auras emanating from their bodies surged madly, unceasingly growing stronger. What's going on? Both of their auras are soaring at the same time. The eyes of the crowd narrowed. After which, they saw both Murong Feng and Du Hao rushing towards their opponents simultaneously. Qin Wentian's countenance stiffened as he blasted out with the revolving sea imprint. However, this time around, Qin Wentian only felt a monstrous force gushing towards him. His body was flung through the air, ruthlessly slamming into the arena as he coughed out a mouthful of blood. This sudden turn of events caused the spectators to be completely dumbfounded. What was going on? The tides of the battle had turned in an instant. Boom! Murong Feng's silhouette was as fast as lightning. His Void Splitter Fist slammed towards Qin Wentian. His fist light tore apart space, wanting to shatter Qin Wentian into pieces. Stay your hand! Luo Huan roared, her countenance drastically changing. This battle had escalated to such an intense degree, this was something that no one had expected. Qin Wentian's countenance paled. He leapt into the air, but the fist light had already arrived. Break! A howl of rage rang out, only to see Fatty madly sprinting over. Using his bare hands, he pierced out with the arrow, shattering it into pieces. The incomparably tyrannical Space Render fist smashed into Fatty's chest, causing his body to stiffen. After which, he slumped to the ground helplessly, only to be caught by Qin Wentian, who had already stood up. You guys have consumed some medicinal pills. The silhouettes of those from the Green Cloud Association flickered as they dashed up the arena. However, those from the Knights Association weren't willing to be outdone, and similarly, they stepped onto the arena, clashing head-on with those from the Green Cloud Association. This is their own strength, Orkan emotionlessly stated. There's no longer any meaning in continuing this battle. Luo Huan's countenance was ice-cold. The combat prowess of Qin Wentian and Du Hao had given everyone a pleasant surprise. The two of them were only at the second level of arterial circulation, yet they were able to fight against a third-level arterial circulation realm and a fourth-level arterial circulation realm cultivator. Not only that, Murong Feng had even used the power of his bloodline limit. However, who would have thought that at the very last moment, Murong Feng and Du Hao's strength would explode once again? The battle hasn't ended yet, so the others are not allowed to interfere. Orkan coldly laughed. Fatty. At this moment, Qin Wentian's eyes reddened as he stared at Fan Lu. This was the second time. Damn it, it's really painful. Brother, these two bastards cheated us. I, Fatty, won't be able to help you in the future. Just admit defeat. Fan Lu laughed. Qin Wentian retrieved his silver needles and pierced them into several of Fan Li's acupoints, preventing his injuries from worsening. The battle hasn't ended yet. Murong Feng slowly walked over. Qin Wentian inclined his head, only to see Murong Feng and Du Hao's expressions filled with ruthlessness. Their goal today was to cripple Qin Wentian and Du Hao. Qin Wentian directly pierced a silver needle into his own temple. He stared at Murong Feng as killing intent gushed forth from his eyes. After which, he inserted the silver needles into every acupoint on his body. Very quickly, silver needles had been inserted into every single acupoint on his body. Streams of qi flowed through the silver needles and circulated throughout his body. The 12 linked chains needle technique can save your life, but it can also take your life. Before stepping into Yuanfu, you are not allowed to use the needles. Qin Wentian could still vaguely remember Uncle Black's instructions. But at this moment, he couldn't care less. Within Qin Wentian's body, a chain of qi circulated frenziedly. Within his body, his blood boiled, as though there were countless formless shackles locking down his blood vessels. However, as the chain of qi transformed into a vortex, the formless shackles broke apart unceasingly. Fatty, I guarantee that there won't be a next time. The corners of Qin Wentian's lips curled up in a smile as he stared at Fatty in his arms. However, in the next instant, when he turned his gaze towards Murong Feng and Du Hao, his eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. Die! Qin Wentian howled in rage. His robes were directly torn apart as his blood vessels were ignited. At this moment, Qin Wentian could feel boundless power surging within him. This feeling was similar to the time when he was ignited by Fan Li's Empyrean flame bloodline. However, this time around, it was even stronger. Was the 12 linked chains needle technique really just a set of needles? Chapter 61. A terrifying killing intent gushed forth from Qin Wentian's body. The spectators stared at the bare-chested Qin Wentian as their hearts pounded wildly. On Qin Wentian's body, lines of bloodline runic lines could be seen. The crowd felt as though they were looking at a complicated chain of shackles. What is that thing? The hearts of the spectators trembled violently. Even Mustang, who had just stepped onto the platform, was dumbfounded. Earlier, when he saw Qin Wentian in danger, he immediately appeared from the shadows. Not only Mustang, but several other elders also stepped out. However, no one paid any attention to them. The gazes of the crowd were all focused on Qin Wentian. Qin Wentian placed Fan Le down, as he stared at Murong Feng. Upon seeing the bloodthirsty look in Qin Wentian's eyes, Murong Feng actually felt a trace of fear. Even the power of his bloodline limit was trembling slightly. Boom! Qin Wentian stepped out, filled with a boundless killing intent as he dashed towards Murong Feng and Du Hao. Murong Feng and Du Hao's countenances sank, as they too dashed towards Qin Wentian. At this point, they couldn't afford to lose. Die! Qin Wentian roared once more. The revolving sea imprint shone with a towering killing intent as it lunged towards Murong Feng and Du Hao. The attacks of the two were instantly engulfed by the revolving sea imprint as they were flung through the air. The qi and blood in their bodies churned violently as they coughed out blood. Qin Wentian madly dashed out once more. The countenances of Murong Feng and Du Hao paled as they turned and sprinted down the platform. However, in the blink of an eye, Qin Wentian had already caught up to Du Hao. Du Hao's entire body was flung through the air as he fell heavily onto the ground, unconscious. Too violent. The spectators were all dumbfounded. Today's battle had exceeded everyone's expectations. Qin Wentian's footsteps didn't stop as he continued chasing after Murong Feng. Feeling the killing intent behind him, Murong Feng's countenance was filled with terror. He, the number one student of the Emperor's Star Academy, was he going to be killed by this madman today? The revolving sea imprint blasted out once again. Qin Wentian was filled with rage as he attacked. The terrifying palm imprint wanted to tear Murong Feng's body apart. Stop! However, at this moment, a loud roar rang out in the air. A silhouette descended from the sky and slashed out with a gigantic palm. The revolving sea imprint instantly shattered as a terrifying hurricane directly blasted Qin Wentian away. Qin Wentian got up from the ground and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Looking at the figure in front of him, his killing intent surged. Janus! Bastard, you actually dare to be so ruthless, once again attacking a fellow disciple. Jiang Zhen angrily roared, his gaze sharp. Qin Wendian stared at him, his killing intent surging as he coldly stated, "Earlier when they attacked me, you didn't appear at all. Your disciple, Orkan, said that the battle has not ended and nobody is allowed to interfere. Now that you've appeared, it's truly a good time." Qin Wendian's voice was cold to the extreme, not giving any face to Janice. At this moment, Murong Feng, who was standing behind Janice, was still in a state of shock. His gaze was filled with fear as he stared at Qin Wendian. "Janice, as an elder of the Emperor's Star Academy, you actually dared to act against my disciple. How shameless." Mustang slowly walked over to the side of Qin Wendian, glaring at Janice. "Elder Thousand Hands, isn't it about time for you to come out?" Janice spoke. Momentarily, a silhouette soared through the air. It was none other than Elder Thousand Hands of the Disciplinary Institute. Luo Huan also walked out. She stared at Thousand Hands as she asked, "Elder Thousand Hands, during a fair battle, consuming medicinal pills to increase one's combat prowess. Not only that, his methods were ruthless, wanting to cripple a fellow disciple. How should we handle this?" Thousand Hands bitterly smiled, feeling extremely depressed. He had watched the entire battle from the start to the end. Honestly speaking, he was extremely shocked by the talent of both Qin Wendian and Murong Feng. Both of them were so outstanding, especially Qin Wendian. However, if something were to happen to Murong Feng, it would be a loss to the academy as well. Once again, he had to face the same situation as before. "Elder Thousand Hands, this battle shall end here." In any case, there was no rule stating that one couldn't use certain methods during the battle. Murong Feng was defeated, and the Knights Association will pay the wager. However, Qin Wendian was so ruthless towards Du Hao, and even tried to kill Janice. Shouldn't he be punished? Janice stared at Thousand Hands as he spoke, his countenance cold and detached. If he won, he wouldn't allow others to interfere. But if he lost, the old bastard stepped out. What a joke. If I give up today, how can I face my brother? Qin Wendian stepped out, continuing towards Murong Feng. Janice's countenance sank as he moved in front of Qin Wendian, blocking his path. "You don't know what's good for you, and you even disregard your elders. You have no manners at all. Old bastard." Qin Wendian continued walking forwards, staring at Janice. Upon hearing Qin Wendian's insults, Janice's aura grew colder and colder. "Today, I'll have to be impudent for once." Mustang slowly walked out, dashing towards Janice as he indifferently stated to Qin Wendian, "Leave him to me." "Mustang, how dare you?" Janice stared at Mustang as his countenance stiffened. Mustang directly dashed towards him, intending to make a move. A battle between elders of the Emperor's Star Academy was an extremely rare sight. But today, the students of the Emperor's Star Academy had witnessed it. "Return to the Knights Association." Orkan shouted to Murong Feng, as he led the members of the Knights Association away from here. Qin Wendian glanced at Luo Huan and the rest as he asked, "Senior sister, can you help me with something?" Upon hearing Qin Wendian's words, the corners of Luo Huan's lips curled up in an enchanting smile as she replied, "Today, the battle between the Knights Association and the Green Cloud Association has yet to end. Since the Knights Association has openly interfered, our Green Cloud Association will definitely not be a pushover." After which, they madly sprinted towards the direction of the members of the Knights Association. Qin Wendian similarly stepped out, causing great waves to surge in the hearts of the crowd as they followed after Qin Wendian. Chaos, everything is in chaos. Thousand Hands bitterly laughed as he witnessed this scene. He could only chase after them. The members of the Knights Association retreated to a separate manner, only to see the members of the Green Cloud Association charging towards them. This caused Orkan's countenance to turn extremely unsightly. "What intolerable bullying, let's fight." Orkan's countenance flickered with a cold light as he frenziedly released his astral souls. Both sides directly engaged in a fierce battle, while Qin Wentian's gaze landed on Murong Feng, his killing intent surging violently. Boom! Qin Wentian madly sprinted forward once again. Help him clear the path, Luo Huan commanded. After which, Yu Fei and Mountain stood on the left and right of Qin Wentian, releasing their astral souls. The two of them were also members of the Green Cloud Association. Qin Wentian's speed was exceedingly fast. Whenever someone attacked from the side, Yu Fei's sword and Mountain's violent attacks would instantly be unleashed. Both of them entered a berserk state, disregarding everything to attack. Murong Feng's countenance turned unsightly as he turned and fled once again. The astral energy in Qin Wentian's body flowed through his arterial pathways and into his legs. Qin Wentian's speed was even faster than Murong Feng's, and in the blink of an eye, he had already caught up to Murong Feng. With a howl of rage, he blasted out with the dragon's subduing fist, instantly slamming into Murong Feng's back, causing him to fall to the ground. Murong Feng turned, only to see a gigantic foot stomping down on his chest, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. "Stay your hand." A loud voice rang out. Janus soared through the air, directly appearing in front of Qin Wentian. Glaring at Qin Wentian, he coldly stated, "This is the second time, and this time, it's the #1 student of the Emperor's Star Academy." As he spoke, Janus took a step forward, as a terrifying pressure bore down on Qin Wentian. "Try and touch him if you dare." Mustang chased after Janus, landing behind Qin Wentian. From afar, there was a continuous stream of people madly sprinting over, their hearts pounding. This was indeed the second time, and it was very similar to the time when Orphan was killed. #1 student. Now, he is no longer the #1. Qin Wentian stared at Janus as he continued, Murong Feng and Du Hao's auras surged at the same time. Don't tell me that they didn't consume any medicinal pills, and used such despicable methods to cripple me and Fan Lo. The members of the Knights Association didn't allow others to participate, and neither you nor the elder from the disciplinary hall stepped out to stop them. In that case, no one can stop me now. I won't allow you to do it a second time. Janus continued stepping forwards. This time around, the main character, Murong Feng, was even more outstanding compared to Orphan. "Today, I'm really going to do it." Qin Wentian spat out. After which, he stared at Orkan and the rest as he coldly stated, "The first time was to kill me in the dark forest, the second time was in the City of Illusions, the third time was on the battle platform earlier. If you guys aren't afraid, why should I be afraid?" Qin Wentian's killing intent surged as he lowered his head and stared at Murong Feng. "Whoever dares to touch my brother's people, no matter who you are, I will kill you." Qin Wentian roared, as the revolving sea imprint blasted out once again, transforming into a terrifying gigantic imprint that slammed into Murong Feng's head. The result was self-evident. The former #1 student of the Emperor's Star Academy was slain by Qin Wentian, right in front of Janus. "You're courting death." The killing intent radiating from Janus grew even more intense. Qin Wentian stared at him without fear as he stated, "Since I can kill him today, I will be able to kill you within a few years. So, if you have the guts, kill me now. If not, don't provoke me." After speaking, Qin Wentian turned and left, leaving behind a stunned Janus. "Since I can kill him today, I will be able to kill you within a few years. So, if you have the guts, kill me now. If not, don't provoke me." Janus was so angry that his body was trembling. Other than anger, there was also a hint of fear in the depths of his heart. The expression in the eyes of the youth was so cold, so resolute. Chapter 62. Just like that, Qin Wentian left in a dignified manner, rushing into the territory of the Knights Association and killing the #1 student, Murong Feng. The members of the Green Cloud Association began to retreat, only to see Luo Huan speaking to Orkan. "There's no need for me to say anything more about the outcome of this battle. Where's the wager of the Knights Association?" "Wager?" Orkan's countenance was ice cold. Qin Wentian has killed his fellow students multiple times. If the Emperor's Star Academy doesn't punish him, where would the prestige of the disciplinary board go? I still remember that before the battle started, Murong Feng and Du Hao had already expressed their stance. If they died in battle, it would be because of their incompetence, and there was no need for the academy to pursue the matter. I'm sure that all the students and elders of the Emperor's Star Academy who were present heard this. Luo Huan laughed as she continued, naturally, if the Knights Association wants to renege on their debt, our Green Cloud Association would have nothing to say. However, the lesson this time around was truly satisfying. After speaking, Luo Huan led the members of the Green Cloud Association away, her heart filled with worry. That little fellow was truly crazy. This time around, the one he killed was a genius. Who knew if the higher-ups of the Emperor's Star Academy would be infuriated by this? Qin Wentian didn't think too much about it. He was only a 16-year-old youth, and when he saw his own brother suffering such a heavy injury in order to save him, he had already lost his rationality. His only goal was to kill Murong Feng. Very obviously, he had accomplished it. After which, Qin Wentian handed Fan Lu over to Mustang. Murong Feng's punch was extremely ferocious, and although Fan Lu had blocked a portion of the force, he had still suffered heavy injuries. Qin Wentian followed Mustang to his residence. At this moment, he was sitting cross-legged in the training grounds. The terrifying energy within his body felt as though it wanted to devour all of his internal organs, causing his entire body to turn bright red. The energy was simply too tyrannical, and his body was currently unable to withstand it. Qin Wentian had no choice but to follow Mustang to his residence. Before breaking through to Yuanfu, you are not allowed to use acupuncture. Qin Wentian recalled Uncle Black's words. He only felt a burning sensation in his throat as he coughed out a mouthful of fresh blood. With a groan of misery, Qin Wentian fainted. Although Qin Wentian had fainted, the storm had not yet subsided. It was still brewing, and even Thousand Hands was under immense pressure. He had no choice but to look for Mustang and bring Qin Wentian away. 2 days later, when Qin Wentian woke up, he felt pain all over his body as if it was about to fall apart. Sitting up, he saw Mustang standing there with his back facing him. "Teacher!" Qin Wentian called out. Mustang turned his head as a smile appeared on his face. "You've finally awoken. It's best if you don't use that secret art again in the future. Your body isn't able to withstand it, and if it weren't for the fact that you managed to suppress it with medicinal pills in time, I'm afraid you would have been in grave danger." Qin Wentian nodded. "Thank you, teacher. How is Fan Lu?" "Nothing serious happened to him." Mustang shook his head. "You should worry more about yourself. Janice's faction has exerted quite a bit of pressure on the academy. Currently, there are 2 different voices in the academy, and there are many who wish to punish you." Upon hearing that Fan Lu was fine, a smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face. As for the punishment from the academy, he didn't really care about it. Seeing the smile on Qin Wentian's face, Mustang rolled his eyes. "Aren't you worried at all?" "It's useless even if I'm worried. Since I've already done it, I'll admit it. Whatever happens next, I can only face it head-on." Qin Wentian shrugged his shoulders. "What a good, admit it, I hope you can bear the consequences." At this moment, a cold voice drifted over. After which, Qin Wentian saw several people walking in. Only now did Qin Wentian survey his surroundings. This place was the disciplinary hall of the disciplinary hall. It was extremely spacious, and there were many seats on both sides of the hall. The main seat was for the disciplinary elder, but at this moment, there was no one there. Very quickly, quite a number of people arrived. Qin Wentian's sharp senses discovered that these people were divided into 3 camps. Janice was in one camp, Mustang and the other disciplinary elders were in another camp, and Thousand Hands and the other 2 disciplinary elders were in another camp. Evidently, Janice and the others were pressuring the academy for this matter. Killing fellow disciples twice, and both of them were geniuses of this year's batch. Not only that, Du Hao was heavily injured. Qin Wentian's character isn't righteous. Either he's crippled, or he's expelled from the academy. If not, he will only become a scourge in the future. Janice coldly stated, wanting to push Qin Wentian into a corner. The first time, we've already investigated. Orphan wanted to harm Qin Wentian and Du Hao in the dark forest. Since Qin Wentian had done so, what crime is he guilty of? The second time, during a fair duel, Murong Feng and Du Hao consumed medicinal pellets to increase their combat prowess. If they only wanted to obtain victory, that would be fine. But from Qin Wentian's injuries, it's clear that their goal was to kill Fan Lu and Qin Wentian. What crime is Qin Wentian's actions? Mustang stared at Janice as he refuted. He didn't respect the elders of the academy, and even threatened them with words. What's the point of teaching such a scoundrel? Janice coldly retorted. You taught me. Qin Wentian laughed as he looked at Janice, causing Janice's countenance to stiffen. Am I very familiar with you? Qin Wentian continued, you allowed your disciple to kill me, and even used all sorts of methods to get the academy to punish me. And now, you still have the cheek to ask me to respect you? Your skin is really thick. Just like what Qin Wentian had said, since Janice had plotted so much to deal with him, there was no need for him to be polite with him. Elder Thousand Hands, listen to this yourself. Janice coldly snorted. Thousand Hands and the other two turned their gazes onto Qin Wentian. After which, the elder standing beside Thousand Hands asked, if your strength was stronger than Janice, would you have killed him when he obstructed you from killing Murong Feng? I would. Qin Wentian replied without any hesitation, causing Janice's countenance to turn extremely ugly to behold. Why? That elder asked again. Murong Feng injured my brother. Whoever obstructs me will be my enemy. A resolute expression could be seen on the face of the youth. That elder nodded his head, before turning his gaze to Thousand Hands. Thousand Hands swept a glance at the crowd before saying, leave, the disciplinary committee will handle this matter. What does the disciplinary committee intend to do? Janice inquired. This is a matter for the disciplinary committee to handle, please leave. Thousand Hands' words caused Janice to furrow his brows. From Thousand Hands' tone, it was highly possible that he wouldn't do anything to Qin Wentian. I hope that the disciplinary committee can give us an explanation. Janice flicked his sleeves and left, appearing extremely displeased. Mustang patted Qin Wentian on his shoulder as he left as well. He believed that the disciplinary committee wouldn't do anything to Qin Wentian. At the very least, a genius like him wouldn't be expelled from the academy. After they left, Thousand Hands spoke to Qin Wentian, follow me. As he spoke, he slowly walked out of the disciplinary hall. Qin Wentian could only follow behind, not asking any questions. After exiting, Qin Wentian discovered that the back of the disciplinary hall was against a mountain. Thousand Hands actually led him up the mountain, arriving at a courtyard at the waist of the mountain. This courtyard was actually built on the edge of a precipice, and standing at the edge of the precipice, one could overlook the entire Emperor Star Academy. At this moment, there was a silhouette with his hands clasped behind his back, staring down at the Emperor Star Academy. I've brought him here. Thousand Hands gazed at the back of the silhouette, as traces of respect could be seen in his eyes. Little fellow, come here. That person's back was still facing Qin Wentian as he calmly spoke. Qin Wentian glanced at Thousand Hands, only to see him laughing, little fellow, your luck isn't bad. After speaking, Thousand Hands turned and left. His mission was to send Qin Wentian here. Qin Wentian walked towards the edge of the precipice, arriving at the side of the silhouette. Only then did the silhouette turn and look at Qin Wentian. This silhouette was an old man. He looked calm and peaceful, with a few strands of white hair on both sides of his temples. His eyes were immeasurably deep, as though he had experienced the vicissitudes of life. At this moment, a hint of a smile could be seen flickering in his eyes. I like people who don't abide by the rules. You suit my personality very well. That silhouette laughed as he continued, "My name is Ren Qianqing. You might not have heard of my name before, but you should have heard of my deeds. Because, I once did the same thing as you." "What did you do?" A puzzled expression appeared on Qin Wentian's face. "Killing a fellow disciple." Ren Qianqing laughed as he continued, "That was something that happened many years ago. I still remember when I was young, I entered the dreamscape of the Dream Sky Forest and discovered a lecherous fellow. He raped a female student in the Dream Sky Forest, causing her to have a mental breakdown after she woke up. In a fit of rage, I killed that person." Qin Wentian's countenance trembled as a hint of anger flashed in his eyes. Humiliating someone in the dreamscape of the Dream Sky Forest? How vicious. In that case, Senior was one of the 3 people who killed that person. Since you killed someone because of that, the Academy has no reason to punish Senior, right? Qin Wentian asked. Ren Qianqing shook his head, "I'm not like you. Back then, my talent was mediocre, and the person I killed had a higher talent than me. In this world, what others see is not fairness and justice. Not only that, the Emperor Star Academy has its own rules. In the Dream Sky Forest, you can do anything you want. Even killing someone is a common occurrence." Chapter 63. Qin Wentian nodded his head in agreement. In the world of cultivation, there was indeed no such thing as fairness and justice. Back then when he killed Orphan, if it wasn't for his outstanding talent, how could the Emperor Star Academy spare him? However, even though the world is like this, humans still have to have their own beliefs. I admire people with character, even if they don't abide by the rules, but I hate those who are too egotistical. These kinds of people would only care about their own benefits. For example, if the Emperor Star Academy nurtured them, and one day, they would become a powerhouse, and if someone offered them greater benefits, they would destroy the Emperor Star Academy. Ren Qianqing laughed as he continued, "But you are different. Last year, during the sacrificial ceremony, the Yi clan wanted to destroy the Qin clan. You could have joined the Star River Association, but you didn't. Instead, you chose to advance and retreat together with the Qin clan. Although you are a little foolish, this is the personality I like." This matter was known by everyone in Sky Harmony City. Mustang was also in Sky Harmony City back then, so it wasn't surprising that Ren Qianqing knew about it. A smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face as he asked, "Seems like Senior's philosophy is similar to Teacher Mustang's. Is Senior the headmaster?" "No." Ren Qianqing shook his head. "I'm the second person, the one who was imprisoned for many years. Naturally, since it's just a rumor, you can't believe it completely. It's just that I rarely appear in the public eye. Seems like the Emperor Star Academy has many secrets." Qin Wentian silently mused. "Senior, I've caused quite a bit of trouble this time around. I'm afraid I've caused trouble for the Emperor Star Academy." Qin Wentian shifted his gaze onto Ren Qianqing. "You want to know how the Emperor Star Academy will handle this matter, as well as the reason why they called you here, right?" Ren Qianqing's eyes gleamed with wisdom, causing Qin Wentian to smile awkwardly. "This little bit of trouble is nothing to the Emperor Star Academy, but you've caused so much trouble for yourself." Ren Qianqing casually replied, "The Emperor Star Academy has a history of over a few thousand years. Regardless of elders or students, their way of doing things is different. But precisely because of this, the students of the Academy have a strong sense of competition. This is the only way the Academy is complete. The Emperor Star Academy has never imparted ideals to its students. It only teaches cultivation, and doesn't care what kind of person you will become in the future. This is precisely the reason why the Emperor Star Academy has such a transcendent status. The matter between you and Orkan, the Emperor Star Academy will not interfere. This place is merely a platform. How high you can soar, will depend on yourselves." Ren Qianqing laughed, "As for the reason why I invited you here, it's because I wanted to see what kind of person you are. Now that I've met you, you can go back now." "Ah." Qin Wentian blinked. That's it? What do you want? Ren Qianqing looked into Qin Wentian's eyes and smiled. And here I thought that I would be pleasantly surprised after meeting a legendary character of the academy. Qin Wentian rubbed his chin as he laughed. Ha! Ren Qianqing laughed uproariously. Fine, if you want a surprise, I'll give it to you. Ren Qianqing retrieved a small golden sword the size of a finger, yet it exuded a terrifying sharpness. This is the Gold Punisher Sword, a third-level divine weapon. However, it can only be used once. As long as the divine imprints within are activated, the Gold Punisher Sword will explode forth with a terrifying sword chi. If the sword chi completely hits the target, even a cultivator at the 5th level of Yuanfu wouldn't be able to evade it. The area of effect of the sword chi is extremely wide, so you must be careful when using it. A sharp glint of light flashed in Qin Wentian's eyes. What a precious gift. He himself knew that if it was a third-level divine weapon, he wouldn't be able to unleash its full power. However, this Gold Punisher Sword was different. It was a single-use divine weapon, and could be used as a life-saving trump card. In the academy, I won't give you any special privileges. If you want resources, you have to fight for them yourself. There are many terrifying innate techniques and cultivation arts in the Heavenly Star Pavilion. If you have the ability, go and get them yourself. As for the Gold Punisher Sword, I gave it to you because you are not safe in the royal capital. Unless you are in a life or death situation, don't use it. Many thanks, old Ren. Qin Wentian felt gratitude in his heart. Indeed, he needed such a life-saving trump card. After all, there were many people who wanted his life. Not to mention the royal clan and the Yi clan, he wouldn't even be able to deal with Orkan. You can go, but don't tell anyone that you've met me, including Mustang. Ren Qianqing waved his hands at Qin Wentian. Wentian shall take his leave. Qin Wentian bowed slightly to Ren Qianqing before turning and departing. On the face of the youth, a smile as bright as the sun could be seen. It was hard to imagine that such a youth would have the same craziness as when he killed Murong Feng that day. Staring at the departing back view of the youth, the corners of Ren Qianqing's mouth curled up in a smile. This little fellow was even more interesting than him in the past. You really can't stay idle. At this moment, a silhouette drifted over from the void. How is it? Are you prepared to include him in your plans? That person laughed. Ren Qianqing shifted his gaze to the person who had just arrived. There shouldn't be any problems with his talent. As for his character, at least from the looks of it now, there shouldn't be any problems. He just entered the academy not too long ago and already caused such a huge commotion. Aren't you worried that he would become another him? That person laughed. Young and frivolous, it's not a big deal. Wasn't I the same when I was young? As for what you said, I will consider it. Let's just continue to observe. Ren Qianqing shook his head as a bitter smile appeared on his face. Back then, he had also regarded a youth highly. But in the end, he discovered that he had raised a ferocious wolf that had almost brought a calamity to the Emperor's Star Academy. As he thought of this, his heart couldn't help but ache. Back then, he had regarded that fellow with great importance. But the things that happened afterwards caused him to feel bitter and bitter. After Qin Wentian descended the mountain, he headed back to his residence. As he walked through the academy, several gazes landed on him, as expressions of interest could be seen on their faces. It's Qin Wentian. I heard that he was sent to the disciplinary hall, but today, he walked out unscathed. Evidently, the academy has no plans to punish him. Talent is a privilege. If it was a higher-year student who killed a genius like Murong Feng, the consequences would be dire. However, Qin Wentian defeated Murong Feng head-on. Not only that, he jumped levels to do so. Not only that, his talent is even stronger than Murong Feng's. The title of the top ranker amongst the new students has already changed hands. Within the academy, many people were whispering to each other. If this was the case, things were getting more and more interesting. Janus and the Knights Association would definitely be infuriated. They would definitely not let Qin Wentian off so easily. Qin Wentian quickened his pace as he walked towards his residence. Even before he arrived, he had already called out, "Fatty." Fan Li's head popped out as he walked towards Qin Wentian. "Fatty, how's your injury?" Qin Wentian contemplated Fan Li, only to see Fan Li grinning as he replied, "It's nothing serious. Why don't we take a walk around the academy? It's good that you're fine." Qin Wentian couldn't help but have a look of bewilderment on his face when he saw the flickering look in Fan Li's eyes. At this moment, a light sound drifted out from within the room. "Who's inside?" Qin Wentian asked as his eyes flickered. "Little rascal is moving around inside, let's go." Fan Li pulled Qin Wentian along, but Qin Wentian didn't budge. Instead, he walked towards the dormitory, and very quickly, he saw a silhouette walking out with his head lowered. Sheena's dainty hands clutched onto her robes, her face flushed red. She lifted her head and sneaked a glance at Qin Wentian, and upon seeing the stunned expression on Qin Wentian's face, her face instantly turned boiling hot. "It's not what you think, I'm only here to see him." Sheena stuttered. "I understand." Qin Wentian looked at Sheena and nodded his head, causing Sheena's face to turn even redder. Stomping her feet, she glared at Fan Li, "It's all your fault." After speaking, she turned and walked away, leaving Qin Wentian staring at Fan Li with a dumbfounded expression on his face. He was still worried about Fatty on the way here, but it seemed like his worries were all for naught. "Fatty, you're really something." Qin Wentian flashed a thumbs up. "Although I know you won't believe me no matter what I say, I still have to say it. I really don't have any other feelings for Sheena." Fatty stared at the shameless expression on Qin Wentian's face as he suddenly put on a serious expression. "Actually, the person I like, is you." Qin Wentian's face was filled with black lines. This time around, it was Fatty's turn to laugh shamelessly as he hummed a little tune. Qin Wentian was completely defeated. "Let's go to the glory courtyard to raise the grade of our Emperor's Star Jade medallions." Fan Li lifted his foot, as a smile appeared on Qin Wentian's face. After which, the two of them went to the glory courtyard, where the elders directly raised the grade of their Emperor's Star Jade medallions to the 3rd grade. Although that battle had caused great waves of commotion, Qin Wentian and Fan Li had indeed gained the upper hand when they fought against Murong Feng and Du Hao. Naturally, the two of them replaced their opponents in the rankings, becoming the top 3. Hence, they could directly raise the grade of their Emperor's Star Jade medallions. After raising the grade of their medallions, the two of them went to the Heavenly Star Pavilion. A 3rd grade Jade medallion would allow them to enter the 3rd level of the Heavenly Star Pavilion. The Heavenly Star Pavilion was divided into 9 levels, and each level contained many cultivation arts and innate techniques of different grades. Qin Wentian and Fan Li directly went to the 3rd level. The cultivation arts here were all at the peak of the arterial circulation realm, while the innate techniques were all at the high grade of the mortal realm. The Dragon Subduing Fist was a high-grade human-grade innate technique. In the hearts of the students of the Emperor's Star Academy, there was a question. What was above the 6th level of the Heavenly Star Pavilion? Stepping into the 7th level of the Heavenly Star Pavilion was the dream of every student in the Emperor's Star Academy. It was said that once upon a time, there was a person who had accomplished an astonishing feat. However, that person betrayed the Emperor's Star Academy and almost caused the destruction of the Emperor's Star Academy. The Emperor's Star Academy had never mentioned this part of history. Chapter 64. On the 3rd level of the Heavenly Star Pavilion, ancient bookshelves were neatly arranged within the spacious space. On top of these bookshelves, there were many different types of secret manuals. Top-tier arterial circulation cultivation arts as well as top-tier mortal innate techniques. These are extremely rare even in Sky Harmony City. Here, there's an endless supply of them, and you can choose whatever you want to cultivate. Qin Wentian sighed. This was the power of resources. Other than the innate talent of the disciples nurtured by the major powers, it couldn't be separated from the vast amount of resources they had. Qin Wendian didn't choose any cultivation arts, but rather, searched for the innate techniques he wanted. Falling mountain palms, willow leaves movement technique, imperial sword art. Upon seeing the imperial sword art, Qin Wendian's eyes lit up as he called out, "Fatty, come over here." Fan Lu walked over, as Qin Wendian passed the imperial sword art to him. "You have the innate talent bestowed by your astral soul, and is extremely suitable for controlling objects. This imperial sword art is a beginner-level innate technique. Are you interested? Let me take a look." Fan Lu received the imperial sword art, as his eyes shone with a bright light. Qin Wendian continued searching. Now that he had cultivated the dragon-subduing fist and the thousand hands imprint, his attacks were already extremely tyrannical. Hence, he wasn't really interested in tyrannical innate techniques, 9 Heavenly Garuda movement technique. Qin Wendian stopped in front of an innate technique, as an expression of interest appeared on his face. A top-tier mortal innate technique from the 3rd level actually had such a tyrannical name, 9 Heavenly Garuda movement technique, arterial circulation manual. As he flipped through the manual, Qin Wendian's attention was instantly drawn to it, as a sharp glint of light flickered in his eyes. So it turned out that this secret manual was only the first volume of the Garuda movement technique, the arterial circulation manual. Although it was only the arterial circulation manual, it was already incomparably complex. It required one to devour demonic spirits and extract the essence of the demonic beasts to temper the Garuda imprint. Not only that, the 9 Heavenly Garuda movement technique only stated that it was the arterial circulation manual, but it didn't specify how many manuals there were. Qin Wendian took the manual and walked to a study table. There was an old man there, the guardian of the 3rd level. "Senior, does this set of Garuda movement technique have a Yuanfu scroll?" Qin Wendian asked as he pointed upwards. The old man glanced at Qin Wendian as he laughed. "I advise you not to cultivate this innate technique. Although there's a Yuanfu manual on it, it's located on the 6th level of the Heavenly Star Pavilion. You don't know how long it would take for you to reach that level. Not only that, this innate technique is extremely difficult to cultivate. Even if you want to reach the grand completion stage of the arterial circulation manual, you'd still have to hunt many bird-type demonic beasts and refine them into the imprint of the Garuda. Moreover, it is very difficult to comprehend this divine ability." Qin Wendian knew that the old man meant well. He smiled and asked, "Are there any better movement techniques on the 3rd floor of the Heavenly Star Pavilion? If I can successfully cultivate the 9 Heavens Garuda skill, the other skills on this level will naturally be incomparable." The old man shook his head. However, it was extremely difficult to cultivate it. "Understood, thank you senior for dispelling my doubts." Qin Wendian laughed as he continued searching for innate techniques. Initially, he wanted to cultivate an innate technique that was compatible with his Great Dream's astral soul. However, after searching the entire level, he still couldn't find one. This type of dream-related innate technique was simply too rare, and because he didn't have a compatible innate technique, his Great Dream's astral soul wasn't able to unleash its full potential. Naturally, even if he didn't have a dream-related innate technique, his Great Dream's astral soul was still an astral soul from the 5th heavenly layer. The astral energy it emitted was still extremely tyrannical. In the end, Qin Wendian only chose to borrow the Garuda movement technique. As for Fan Lu, other than the Imperial Sword technique, he also borrowed another innate technique before leaving the Heavenly Star Pavilion. Just as Qin Wendian and Fan Lu were on their way back, they were blocked. The members of the Knights Association blocked their path. Upon seeing the faces of these people, Fan Li's eyes narrowed in an extremely cold manner. These people were none other than the ones who had used a long spear to pierce through his body back then in the City of Illusions. They were all elites of the Knights Association, and even the weakest among them was stronger than Murong Feng. Their countenances were as cold as ice, and several students of the Emperor Star Academy were spectating from afar. That day, Qin Wendian went berserk and killed Murong Feng from the Knights Association. Not only that, he even killed his way into the headquarters of the Knights Association. This caused the reputation of the Knights Association to fall to the ground. Not only that, the academy didn't even punish him, and directly released Qin Wentian. The members of the Knights Association were naturally infuriated. Not only that, the members of the Knights Association were originally a bunch of geniuses from the aristocratic clans. All along, they were the ones who trampled on others. But today, they were trampled on. This was no longer a matter between Orkhan and Qin Wentian, but a matter that concerned the dignity of the entire Knights Association. That old fellow from the Emperor's Star Academy actually released you just like that. Standing in front of Qin Wentian was a young man with a smile on his face. However, when this smile landed on Qin Wentian, it felt somewhat cold. How impolite of you. Upon hearing the other party directly referring to the old fellow from the Emperor's Star Academy, Qin Wentian's lips curled up, as a sharp aura radiated from him. Where's Orkhan? Qin Wentian inquired. Orkhan? The eyes of the young man flickered. The arrogant Orkhan, because of the matter regarding Qin Wentian, had been locked up by his clan, and was not allowed to come out until he broke through to the 9th level of arterial circulation. Qin Wentian was the foster son of Qin Chuan of the Qin clan in Sky Harmony City. Back then, it was rumored that he had killed Yi Lang. In their eyes, Qin Wentian was someone who looked down on the descendants of the Wu King. Sometimes, they couldn't understand why the current emperor and the Yi clan were so insistent on wiping out the Qin clan. They had heard that the Qin clan was so poor that they didn't even have a few yuan meteor stones. But it was precisely this adopted son of the Qin clan who possessed extraordinary talent. He stood in the Emperor's Star Academy and killed Orkhan's brother, Orphan, as well as Murong Feng from the Knights Association. What was even funnier was that an ant whom they once thought they could easily squash, had actually obtained the favor of the Emperor's Star Academy. If they wanted to kill him, they would have to consider the attitude of the Emperor's Star Academy. After all, they were very clear that the waters of the Emperor's Star Academy were extremely deep. Even the royal clan didn't dare to touch them, and could only do their best to nurture the Royal Academy, hoping that they would be able to contend against the Emperor's Star Academy. Orkhan must be thinking about how to kill you right now. The young man spat out, causing Qin Wentian's eyes to narrow. After which, a cold smile appeared on his face. The words of the young man made sense. Wasn't he the same? He wanted Orkhan's life as well. You killed a member of our Knights Association. Make a guess, how will we deal with you? The young man continued. Qin Wentian and Fan Lu stared at the members of the Knights Association in front of them. Their gazes were akin to that of venomous snakes, as they scrutinized their bodies. The eyes of Qin Wentian and Fan Lu narrowed as they felt the coldness emanating from the young man. Although they were also thinking about how to kill the young man, their current strength was still inferior to the young man. What a pity, the Emperor's Star Academy doesn't allow killing. If not, you would have already died countless times over. The young man took a step forward, and abruptly, a terrifying killing intent gushed towards Qin Wentian and Fan Lu. At the same time, the members of the Knights Association also took a step forward, as an incomparably tyrannical pressure bore down on Qin Wentian and Fan Lu. Both of them involuntarily retreated, as their countenances turned unsightly. The royal capital is not the Sky Harmony City. You will understand that even if you have some talent, you still have to keep a low profile. If not, you will die very quickly. That pitiful talent of yours will never be of any use. The young man took another step forward, causing the ground to rumble. The pressure he exuded was akin to the sharpness of a spear, piercing into Qin Wentian and Fan Li's bodies. The threat in his words was blatant and undisguised. No matter how talented a person was, if they couldn't mature, what use would they be? Stay your hand. At this moment, a shout drifted over from afar. The members of the Knights Association turned their gazes over, only to see a graceful silhouette walking over. Senior Sister Rain. A gentle smile appeared on the young man's face when he saw who it was. So it turned out that this silhouette was a Yuanfu realm student of the Emperor's Star Academy, as well as a guest elder, Rain. Yanaro, as an upperclassman, you actually dare to bully a newbie? Rain unhappily stated. Despite hearing Rain's reprimand, the smile on Yanaro's face was still as gentle as ever. This newbie is an extremely arrogant person. I only wanted him to understand some logic, but since senior sister has spoken, then, as the sound of his voice faded, Yanaro's silhouette abruptly moved. Qin Wendian instantly felt a sense of danger, only to see Yanaro's finger piercing towards him, as sharp as a sword. You. Rain's countenance changed when she saw this scene. She wanted to stop it, but it was already too late. Qin Wendian's countenance stiffened, and the energy within his body instantly gushed forth. The revolving sea imprint was incomparably tyrannical, yet Yanaro's finger seemed to be able to penetrate through everything, as it shone with a resplendent light, breaking apart the revolving sea imprint and directly piercing into Qin Wendian's palm. After doing all this, Yanaro's silhouette retreated in a graceful manner, while Qin Wendian also retreated backwards. Lifting his palm, Qin Wendian could see fresh blood flowing out unceasingly from his palm. His countenance involuntarily grew colder and colder. I hope you will be this lucky every time. Yanaro cast a glance at Rain, who was standing beside Qin Wendian, before turning around and departing with his group. Are you all right? Rain turned to Qin Wendian as she asked. I'm fine. Thank you, senior sister. Qin Wendian smiled at Rain. Since he had decided to kill Murong Feng back then, he should have known that his future days would not be peaceful. However, he wasn't afraid at all. On the contrary, he was filled with anticipation for these challenges. During these few days, Qin Wendian had already deeply understood a certain principle. Regardless of who was behind him, that person would never be as reliable as himself. Only when one's own strength was sufficient, would they be able to control their own destiny. Chapter 65. Rain stared at the departing members of the Knights Association as she continued, Qin Wendian, although the Academy regards you highly, you are still too weak. In the future, it's best if you don't antagonize the members of the Knights Association. If there's any conflict between you and the Knights Association, the Academy won't be able to protect you. Understood. Qin Wendian nodded his head, as he stared at the departing silhouettes. The corners of his lips curled up in an arc, exuding a cold sharpness. His current strength was indeed weak, but unless he was never allowed to make a comeback, he would trample them to death, just like how he dealt with Murong Feng. In any case, the barefooted didn't fear those wearing shoes. No matter what, these people wanted to deal with him. He had no reservations. Right now, he only needed to do one thing, and that was to become stronger. Only when he was strong would he no longer be looked down upon by others. Only when he was strong would he not need to be afraid of the slightest thing. Senior Rain. At this moment, Fan Lu walked towards Rain, as a radiant smile appeared on his face. What's the matter? Rain smiled. Previously, after listening to Senior Rain's lecture, I gained a deep insight. My strength is still too low, and I have many doubts when cultivating. In the future, can I look for Senior Rain to resolve them? Fan Li's serious expression caused Qin Wendian to be dumbfounded. Sure, if you have any doubts, feel free to ask me. Rain gently smiled. She looked at Qin Wendian and Fan Lu as though she was looking at her younger brothers. How could she have guessed that Fan Lu would have such wretched thoughts? Many thanks, senior sister. Fan Li's heart was filled with joy, yet the smile on his face was as bright as the sun. You guys take care of yourselves, I'll take my leave first. Rain smiled at the two of them as she departed. Qin Wendian noticed that Fan Lu was still staring at Rain's back. He couldn't help but smack him on the head. Damn fatty, have you seen enough? Not enough. Fan Lu grinned, as that wretched expression appeared on his face. He blinked his eyes at Qin Wendian. Senior Rain is simply a goddess, gentle and kind. I like it. Others are treating you like a little brat. Qin Wendian glanced at Fan Lu with disdain. Are you that big yourself? Fan Lu rolled his eyes, but when he thought of Rain's promise, a shameless smile appeared on his face as he hummed a little tune as he walked towards his residence. Qin Wentian returned to his residence and started cultivating the Garuda movement technique. From the arterial circulation scroll, Qin Wentian could already tell that this innate technique was many times more terrifying compared to the Thousand Hands imprint. Could it be that the arterial circulation scroll was already so terrifying? As for the Yuanfu cultivation scroll, it would definitely be an innate technique at the pinnacle of the earth grade. Naturally, there was no need for Qin Wentian to worry about the Yuanfu manual. He only needed to focus on cultivating the arterial circulation manual. The arterial circulation manual of the 9 heavenly Garuda movement technique could be split into 4 levels: elementary, exquisite, perfect, and divine movement. It was easy to enter the gate, there was no need for external conditions. All one had to do was to bitterly cultivate the Garuda's 9 movements of the arterial circulation manual. For the exquisite grade, not only did he need to comprehend it, he also needed to devour the spirits of flying-type demonic beasts, extract their essence, and use the Garuda movement technique to refine it. For the perfect grade and divine movement techniques, one would need to absorb the spirits of large amounts of flying-type demonic beasts. Especially for the divine movement technique. Once one stepped into this level, they would have already successfully condensed the Garuda imprint. With a single leap, they would be able to traverse a distance of 10 meters, akin to a great rock spreading its wings. After stepping into Yuanfu, they would be able to soar through the air. For the following days, Qin Wentian immersed himself in the cultivation of the Garuda movement technique. The difficulty of cultivating the Garuda movement technique was much higher compared to the dragon subduing fist. Other than that, he naturally wouldn't forget about cultivation. To him, raising his cultivation level was an extremely pressing matter. Of course, Qin Wentian would occasionally attend lectures given by the elders of the academy. Unknowingly, the ancient trees in the Dream Sky Forest were no longer as green as they used to be. The scorching heat of the sun shone down upon the Emperor's Star Academy, and the cool spring winds were no longer present. The freshmen had already gradually gotten used to the life of a student. Filled with youthful energy, they were filled with boundless hopes and fantasies for the future. Many of them even formed groups and entered the dark forest to undergo the true tempering of death. The training in the City of Illusions had caused them to gradually get used to death, and death no longer seemed as terrifying as before. However, when they truly entered the dark forest and discovered that their companions had died in front of them, they discovered that their hearts weren't as strong as they had imagined. That was a true death, and not a feigned death in the City of Illusions. Although they were students of the Emperor's Star Academy, this was a place where the strong preyed on the weak. It was extremely normal for them to die while training in the wilderness. However, it was precisely this kind of tempering that tempered their hearts and temperaments. In front of the dormitory, Qin Wentian leaned against an ancient tree as he lazily gazed into the distance. It had already been over 4 months since he arrived in the royal capital, yet there was no news of Qin Wu or Qin Chuan. Although Qin Wentian had never expressed anything, only he knew how anxious he was in his heart. He wasn't even willing to inquire about the current situation of the army led by Qin He. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to accept the ending. He had stayed in the Qin residence for over 10 years. That place was his home. However, ever since the Yi clan led their troops into the Sky Harmony City, the Qin residence was torn to shreds. Qin Wu and Qin Chuan were imprisoned in some unknown place, while Qin He and Qin Yu were fighting a bloody battle. Qin Yao and Qin Ji were far away from home to cultivate, not daring to return home. Only by relying on his outstanding talent could he live a peaceful life in the Emperor's Star Academy. However, every step he took was filled with danger. Qin Wentian knew this in his heart. Yi clan. Qin Wentian inclined his head. The sunlight shone through the gaps of the ancient tree, cascading onto his face. However, his gaze was as cold as the edge of a blade. Just like how the Yi clan and Orkhan wouldn't spare him, he similarly wouldn't spare the Yi clan and Orkhan. I wonder how Sister Qin Yao and the rest are doing in the Snowcloud country. I hope they can grow stronger quickly. Qin Wentian could see a beautiful and gentle countenance in his mind. Qin Wentian. At this moment, a voice interrupted Qin Wentian's train of thought. Turning his gaze over, he saw a youth of similar age walking over. This youth was none other than Zhao Yi, a new student who lived not far away from him. Zhao Yi, what's up? Qin Wentian smiled as he looked at him. Recently, there have been quite a few people heading to the dark forest to temper themselves. You are the strongest amongst the new students, don't tell me you don't have any thoughts about going there. Zhao Yi walked towards Qin Wentian. Although Qin Wentian's talent was extremely high, he was easy to get along with. The people around him all had a good relationship with him. The dark forest? A smile flickered on Qin Wentian's face as he stood up and stretched his body. Smiling, he replied, yes, I'm preparing to make a trip there. The arterial circulation chapter of the 9 Heavenly Garuda movement technique was already at the elementary level. However, if he wanted to advance to the exquisite grade, he would have to hunt and kill flying-type demonic beasts. I also wish to go there to temper myself. How about we go together? Zhao Yi couldn't help but feel joy in his heart upon hearing that Qin Wentian wanted to go as well. His strength had already broken through to the 2nd level of arterial circulation a few days ago, but he was only at the initial level. Although his strength wasn't bad amongst the new students, there was still a gap between him and Qin Wentian. If he could form a group with Qin Wentian, it would be much safer for him. Okay, but you have to be prepared at all times. I'll call you when I set off. Qin Wentian laughed. Zhao Yi naturally agreed happily. That night, Qin Wentian and Fan Le woke him up and left the Emperor's Star Academy together with a snowy puppy. This caused Zhao Yi to be extremely depressed, but he could also guess that Qin Wentian was afraid that the Knights Association would keep an eye on him. By the time Qin Wentian and the rest arrived at the dark forest, it was already the 2nd day. There were still many people roaming around the outer perimeter of the dark forest. The dark forest was the most suitable place for students from the various academies and clans to temper themselves. Naturally, it was also heaven and hell for adventurers. The outer perimeter is filled with low-level demonic beasts. Let's go deeper. Qin Wentian spoke. He cultivated the Garuda movement technique, and demonic beasts below the 4th level were practically useless to him. And if he wanted to hunt demonic beasts of the 4th level or higher, it would be even more troublesome, especially when it came to flying beasts. Hence, it was extremely difficult to cultivate the Garuda movement technique. 3 humans and 1 demonic beast began to dash through the dark forest, as though they were extremely excited. Stop! All of a sudden, Fatty Fan Le called out. The 3 of them immediately halted their steps, standing at their original location. Because of the astral souls he had condensed, Fan Le's perception was the sharpest. Our luck isn't bad, it's a 4th level flying demonic beast. However, our luck isn't too good either. This 4th level demonic beast is a violet thunder condor, an astral demonic beast. Not only that, it's also eyeing us. Fatty had a bitter expression on his face, causing Zhao Yi's countenance to stiffen. Astral demonic beasts were equivalent to stellar martial cultivators. Not only that, they were the purest type of stellar martial cultivators. They could absorb the energy of the astral constellations in the heavens to grow, and they didn't need to condense an astral soul to directly absorb the energy of the astral constellations they needed. This was the tyrannical innate talent of astral demonic beasts. All astral demonic beasts had the potential to grow, and as they grew, their perception would grow stronger and stronger, allowing them to absorb the energy of the astral constellations in the heavens. For example, this violet thunder condor, when it was young, it would absorb a little bit of astral energy from the astral constellations. As it grew, it would be able to sense constellations that contained the energy of lightning, and from there, it would be able to absorb the energy of the astral constellations. If it continued to grow, it would be able to sense constellations that were of a higher grade, and it would be able to step into the 2nd heavenly layer, or even the 3rd heavenly layer. This was the terrifying aspect of astral demonic beasts. The more monstrous an astral demonic beast was, the more tyrannical its innate talent would be. Hence, astral demonic beasts were equivalent to stellar martial cultivators. And now, they had encountered a 4th-level violet thunder condor. Zhao Yi was naturally depressed. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.